If the clerk would be so kind as to call the roll.
I'd be happy to for the City Council meeting on November 25th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Councilor Harmon.
Here.
Councilor Khan.
Here.
Councilor Lane.
I'm here.
Wonderful, thank you. Councilor McCauley.
Here.
Councilor Preston.
Here.
Councilor Sheehan.
Present.
Councilor Wright. He's not here yet. Councilor Z. Here. Councilor Donahue.
Here.
Councilor Granis. Here. And Councilor Cameron.
Here. Councilor Wright did tell me he was running late, and we should expect him physically at some point. That would lead us to late files.
Which we have 6 of. We have Communication 599, which is the Plaza Landings Development Agreement. Communication 600, which is the Brown School constituent emails, a number of them. Communication 601, Brown School memo clarification. Order 612, Mayor's memo regarding authorizing the bike share program. Communication 602, Retirement Board budget for 2025. And, excuse me, Order 644, which is a request for storage by Bar 25, the restaurant.
Motion to waive the rules and accept the late files with the following actions. 599, Plaza Landings Development Agreement, receive and file. 600, Brown School constituent emails, receive and file. 601, Brown School memo clarification, receive and file. 612, Mayor's memo regarding authorizing bike share, receive and file. 602, Retirement Board expense budget, receive and file. And 644, referral to license and permits.
Okay.
Second. Can I make a friendly amendment, if you'll accept, is that the Communication 600 and Communication 601, can we send those to Planning and Development
In Committee of the Whole.
and Committee of the Whole?
In that matter, can we send Communication 599 as well to Planning and Development?
Okay, sure.
Okay, if the clerk could just reiterate, and also for the record, Councilor Wright has arrived. We'll give him a little time to settle in.
Councilor Wright.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for being here.
the risk of clarification, Communication 599, that would go to P&D, not Committee of the Whole?
And Committee of the Whole.
And Committee of the Whole.
All three of them, P&D.
So the
Committee.
following are going to P&D, Planning and Development, and Committee of the Whole. Communication 599, Communication 600, and Communication 601. Order 612 is received and filed. Retirement Board expense is received and filed. That's Communication 602. And Order 644 is going to license and permits. Do I have it?
That sounds accurate.
And that was moved by Councilor Z, seconded by?
Preston? Okay, so well, we'll do a roll call.
Roll call on the receiving the late files and sending some of them to the aforementioned places. Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
And Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that would lead us to public comment. So the clerk will get the list, and we'll also take online comment if somebody wants to, some buddies want to raise their hands online. So this is for Newburyport residents, 2 minutes on a topic on the agenda. And if you could state your name and address and step up to the line when I call your name, that would be great. First, Judy Timon.
Good evening, Judy Timon, 39 Lime Street. And the first thing I want to do is to thank all of you for your service as city councilors. I truly appreciate all of you and all the work that you do. And what I would like to do is address a few things with regard to the YWCA and the property tax exemptions. The first is that the YW has been providing affordable housing for women since the 1890s on Market Street. And so we think it's the most continuously operated affordable housing in the country. And number two, the YW has two separate properties, one on Market Street and one at Hillside, and each one contains 10 units of affordable rentals at 30 to 60 AMI. And the city of Newburyport has been assessing these properties at market value, regardless of the fact that they have a deed restriction that requires them to be rented at 30 to 60 AMI. And the other thing I want to make you aware of is the right is current with all of their property taxes at this time. So I would like to request that you support and vote for this ordinance that will allow for an exemption of property taxes for those organizations in the city, such as the YWCA, such as the veterans and others, so that they can continue to operate and provide the public benefit that they do provide to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. John Ian?
Hello, thank you all. John Keane, Executive Director of the YWCA Greater Newburyport. Thank you all for considering this ordinance. It's very important to us. YWCA's affordable housing allows many working people to live close to where they work. They allow seniors to age in place and provide some of the very few fully ADA accessible units for low-income households. These units require extensive initial income and asset certification in order to establish that an applicant is eligible for a unit. Then annually, the tenant has to recertify. Additionally, every year, Community Teamwork does a HUD compliance review of the unit. And then we're monitored annually for compliance by both federal, state, and FHLB. At the same time, we have a 50-year deed restriction, which limits the income of those who we can rent to. These deed restrictions also limit the amount of rent that we can collect. The two projects owned by and managed by the YWCA are very small projects, each with only 10 units. Most affordable housing development in Massachusetts assumes 42 units or more in order to be financially sustainable. Even with low rents and high management expenses, these properties were breaking even prior to 2022 when they were not charged property tax. Beginning in 2022, the city assessed property tax on these projects, and immediately they began running deficits. Without relief, they will no longer be financially viable. We ask that the City Council please pass this ordinance and allow these units to continue to be available to residents of Newburyport. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Avery?
Judy Avery, 54 Milk Street. There's been much talk about giving away the Brown School, even though that was essentially set in motion when the RFP was sent out. I appreciate the spirit of nonprofit property tax exemption, but I wonder how the City Council can reconcile that with giving property away, and perhaps even reducing property taxes for certain commercial property owners, such as Mr. Karp and Mr. Kaplan. At a meeting not too long ago, a counselor said, there are people who have been in this community and would like to stay in this community. I'm one of them. I'm one of them. And it's my taxes that are going to fund all of this for as long as it's possible for me to pay them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Leonard?
Good evening, Mike Leonard, 13 Ting Street, speaking on Order 630, 631. I'm not going to revisit the points that I made on the tax split from the Budget and Finance last Thursday, but I will say a couple of things about the meeting. Regarding the decision to possibly split the tax rate, the statement's made that if the committee goes down that path, a more robust discussion in advance of this meeting tonight is needed, and it would be useful to obtain more information. Those exact same points were made when there was a more serious contemplation of splitting the rate back in late 2022. We need more input, we need more information. If the Budget and Finance tax discussion meeting needs to be scheduled sooner to vet the issue, then do so. And if you need additional information to inform a decision, then obtain it. That meeting is committee of the whole, and it's known well in advance that those topics are going to be on the agenda. Regarding the concern about splitting the tax rate and then having to subsequently revert to the 1.0 residential factor, it's not a requirement that you're locked in for any particular period of time. Moreover, the impact of splitting the rate and reverting back to the 1.0 residential factor in retrospect is determinable. You can look back and do a pro forma analysis to assess the impact of shifting, say 5% shift in CIP and then revert to 1.0. You can do the math and see what that number is. It's knowable. On the free cash planning page 15 of the tax rate information packet, it shows 2.5% of revenue, $1,315,000 funded by free cash. Capital expenditures. The CIP that you rejected, capital improvement plan that you rejected June 25th, 24, the use of free cash for capital was $888,000, so it's gone up apparently by $427,000. I'm just wondering if that creates some play to offset the tax rate with free cash, or is it truly urgent? That number has increased, though, from 888 to $1,315,000. Point on using free cash to offset the tax rate. I don't think one can conclusively say it's better to retain the free cash because the funds retained offset the need to borrow, thus ultimately saving a resident in the long run. Such a statement presumes that you understand the value of those saved funds to residents. What if the funds saved by a resident are part of an investment whose return exceeds the city's borrowing cost?
Thank you, Mike.
That's it?
Yep.
I hit, oh, man.
I gave you 10 extra seconds. I thought, thank you, thank you. Next would be Becca Tanzi.
Good evening. My name is Becca Tanzi. I live at 26 Market Square, number 3. I've lived in Newburyport for the past 4 years, and I've worked at the Newburyport Public Library for almost a decade. I'm here to share my concerns regarding the ordinance currently being discussed to amend Chapter 12, Article 1, Section 12-10 regarding surveillance as it pertains to my building of employment. The library is a 4-floor, 38,000 square foot building. It's typically open to the public 8 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and averages well over 10,000 visitors a month. It's probably the most used public building in this city. This is why I'm concerned that the removal or reduction of camera access at NPL will place both staff and citizens in harm's way. The library's proximity to a popular MIVA bus stop and the commuter rail station means that people from all over the North Shore and beyond can access the library's books, computers, spaces, and most importantly to many, the bathrooms. The ethos of access is deeply important to the library profession. Public libraries are one of the last places where you are allowed to exist without the expectation of spending money. But the practicality is that with heavy foot traffic comes the potential for safety issues. I feel lucky to live and work in a relatively safe community, but mental health issues and violence are on the rise, and we can't be blind to the reality that these struggles do exist in our city. The other cornerstone principle of librarianship is privacy, which is why the cameras are used for safety and not surveillance. The cameras allow staff to monitor who is in the building and whether they're doing something unsafe. Medical emergencies can and do occur, and without cameras, staff may not realize someone needs help until it's too late. I also worry that if we lose access to cameras and someone is seriously injured, the city may be liable. We try to ensure the safety of all visitors to the best of our ability. Staff cannot be monitoring every floor of the library at every moment without sacrificing quality service to our patrons. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Rick Tainter.
Good evening, Rick Tainter, 10 Dexter Street. I'm here talking about the bike share program, representing Newburyport Livable Streets. The order, I believe it's 612, authorizing the bike share program was referred to Public Works and Safety and Committee of the Whole, and that committee met last Monday, the 18th, and voted 2-1 to recommend in favor of the order, subject to receiving metrics regarding program success. And then on November 20th, the mayor sent a memo to you, which is in your packet, providing some draft metrics that, and recognizing that those would evolve as the program was further defined and as a vendor was selected. So I think we have met the requirements of the committee, and I would ask you to approve the order, which is coming out of Public Works and Safety tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be Judy Sharkey.
Hi, good evening. My name is Judy Sharkey, and I live at 17 Beacon Avenue. I've been in Newburyport for 23 years. 10 of my first years were at Lime Street. I'm an avid cyclist, try to cycle everywhere that I can, and I'm here in support of the bike share program. I've joined just recently Newburyport Livable Streets, so I have nothing to do with the excellent work that the program has done on behalf, but it's aspirational. Just as I wear a Celtics shirt, doesn't mean I play for the Celtics, but I totally support this group. I know you've heard a lot of the benefits of the bike share programs. It's healthy living overall, right? It reduces our carbon emissions, but a couple of other things to keep in mind. This is the beauty of a pilot program, right? We have the opportunity to really make sure we have a program that best fits the needs of Newburyport. Bike share in Newburyport is not going to be the same as a bike share in Somerville, right? So to have the opportunity for a pilot program, it just makes good sense. Also, in terms of safety, there are safety in numbers. A recent report, I think it was from 2020, the American Journal of Public Health, showed that that bike share programs can increase bicycle safety because the increased number of bicycles makes drivers safer drivers. So the more of us that there are out there and around, the safer our streets become. And lastly, I'd just like to put in a push and a plug for, again, Newburyport Reliable Streets, Livable Streets. They've got a great track record in terms of working with our schools around safety, the bike safety rodeo that was, I think, in November, the moonlit rides on the refuge, and the great advocacy work around the 25-mile speed limit in the city. So they have a great track record. I think you could feel safe that this group is going to make sure this is a successful program. Thank you.
Perfect timing, thank you. Next would be Jane Snow.
Jane Snow, 9 Coffin Street. The news is out. You can check to see how much your house has been increased, maybe even decreased in terms of appraised values. Mine went up again this year. Last year it was $200,000, so this year was a much better increase than that. I didn't get sticker value and have to have another cup of coffee. But it still means that my taxes are going to go up $250 for next year. 77% of our residents own their home, and it was around 7,000 of us are 50 and older. So I am concerned about the fact that our budgets are being stretched incredibly thin. So I understand the idea of putting out a tax exemption. I truly do. I spent a lot of time looking up the data to see if I could get a better understanding, especially of all the letter acronyms. I have a cheat sheet now on the side of my desk for all the EOHCs and so forth and so on. But I think at this time, where it's a little bit the cart before the horse. We are incredibly lucky that right now we have 2 good, viable projects that will provide us with some affordable housing and some rental units, which we don't have. And so I ended up having questions with the list of the exemptions in terms of these places do get subsidies, so how much subsidy money do they get? I think we need to have a clearer understanding of what this would do, because right now we're looking at $145,000 with what we think will apply for this, and that all has to come out of the budget, and it can't come out of the tax portion. So that really concerns me, along with some of the comments that I've heard with councilors. We really need to all work together to make the 2 projects that are in front of us the best we can by making positive suggestions, turn the lemons into lemonade, do that kind of a thing, so that we have 2 great projects under our belt to help with the tax base.
Thank you.
So please do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that would lead us to Owen Smith.
Yeah, good evening. Owen Smith, 175 Story Avenue. I'd like to talk about the tax rate setting today. I looked through the packet, and notably the residential factor is blank and the mill rate is blank. So, you know, one thing I think, if I'm preparing to be informed about the decisions, I'd like to see stuff like that in the packet. Second, you know, we had a pretty contentious budget vote 5 months ago. We're almost 5 solid months into this fiscal year. I'd like to see that we have financial performance data accompanied with our proposed tax rate setting to see if we're on target for our budget and see if we're on target for our revenue. And third, you know, we talk about, you know, our continued budget increases. You know, I have not seen any change in the way the city does business. One thing we can do as a city is actually start analyzing and doing performance audits on our own programs, seeing where the programs are falling short, seeing where we can be more effective, and seeing what we can cut. I'm a person that lives, you know, with a bigger federal budget, and I see this happen all the time. We do a continuing resolution, we just waste more time because we're not canceling programs on time because we don't have a full year budget. So we really do need to be budgeting a year ahead here. We need to be evaluating our programs. The state auditor's office provides performance auditing services at a nominal expense to the city, but the process starts with you. It starts with the city council creating a resolution requesting the state auditor come in here and start looking at our programs. Thank you.
Thank you. That would lead us to Parker Jones. Hi. Okay. Thank you. Nice to see you. Your handwriting's terrible. Pam Kipp.
Pam Kipp, 11 Tremont Street. I'm here to speak on behalf of the need for deeply affordable housing and the tax exemption for that. However, I'm learning that there are a lot more complicating factors, and I'd like you to reconsider the split tax rate and business picking up more taxes, and I'm very concerned about residents picking up more of the bill, because I know what my taxes have gone up in the last 35 years we've been here, so thank you.
Thank you. And last in person would be David Webster.
David Webster, 37 Broad Street. I'm also here in support of the tax exemption for affordable housing. Assessing affordable housing at market rates undermines the objective of affordable housing. Affordable rents are fixed and can't keep pace with increased operating costs such as insurance, utilities, and property taxes that are based on market rates. The most vulnerable members of our community, Newburyport residents who, without access to affordable rental housing, might be forced to live in someone's basement or on a couch or in their car, deserve our support. The city should recognize the value of these units, invest in affordable housing, and allow our neighbors the dignity of having a suitable home. Thank you.
Thank you. And that would bring us to online comment, and we have at least one person. Marianne, if I'm going to allow you to talk, and if you could state your name, address, and 2 minutes on an item on the agenda.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for your work on all of these issues.
If you could speak up a little bit, can you speak up a little bit?
Comments made by John Fan and Judy Timon about the ordinance regarding property tax on affordable housing. I don't think we can say that we feel that it's an important value for the city to have deeply affordable housing, and then you create such barriers for developers that they can't even pay the property taxes at market value. So I think I feel strongly that they need to be decreased for those kinds of companies. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. All right, so that is it for public comment. That would lead us to the mayor's comment. And I believe the mayor had a couple of other obligations and is not here, so we would, he did email us the mayor's comment earlier this afternoon. Should we make the clerk read it? Oh.
At your disposal. All right. Thanksgiving, a very happy Thanksgiving to everyone. There's always...
Which I was kind of kidding.
Yeah. Motion to waive that?
We want to give you your morning in the sun, but, yeah, I think people got it, and it is,
I'm fine with that, Mr. President.
yeah, we can make sure
Motion,
that's
I'll just
available.
make a motion to receive and file it if you want.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, roll call?
Receiving and filing mayor's comment. Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane. Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
One voice, one vote. Councilor McCauley, yes. Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Sheehan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Granis? Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, consent agenda.
The consent agenda this evening consists of the approval of the minutes from November 12th. There's one communication, application 236, a movable sign permit for Michael O'Rourke, 148 State Street, to go to license and permits. One transfer 205, it's the ASME union settlement, which is $129,000, $41,000, $42,000, and $212,000 to go to Budget and Finance. The following items are removed from their respective committees: Budget and Finance, Ordinance 178, Order 616, 617, 620, Transfer 201, 202, and Orders 630 and 631. General Government, Order 637 is coming out. Planning and Development, Appointment 519, 522, Communications 594 and 595, Public Works and Safety, Order 634, Order 635, Communication 582, and Order 612, all coming out.
Can we amend to add Committee of the Whole to transfer 205, please?
Second.
And then otherwise, motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, so transfer 205, also add committee of the whole,
Correct.
and that was, we all set with that? And
Yes.
motion made, Councilor Zede, seconded, I believe, by Councilor Preston. So we'll do a roll call on the consent agenda.
The consent agenda as moved, as amended. Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Sheehan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis. And Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you. I think that leads us to first reading, Mr. President.
Yes, I think so.
That's a reappointment, appointment 523, Marcia Edson, 11 Salem Street, to the Tree Commission until 12/15/2027.
Motion approved on first reading.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Zede, seconded by Councilor Preston. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call.
On approving the appointment, first reading, Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Sheehan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you. No communications, no transfers, no second readings. We go right to orders that were continued from our,
Motion collectively to approve all the continued orders 6, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 33.
Second.
I don't know if you want me to read them or you want to read them.
Yeah, if the clerk could just read the titles, that
Yeah,
would be sufficient.
626 is approval of prior year bills. Order 627 is the grant acceptance for the library HVAC system. Order 628 is a gift acceptance, Friends of COA, $4,700. Order 629, gift acceptance PPA, which is the Parks, $2,500. And did you say 633, approving the William Lloyd Garrison proclamation?
Indeed.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Any discussion? So motion made, Counselor Zede, who was the second on that one?
Counselor Harmon, I think.
Harmon.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston. Counselor Sheehan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
Counselor Granis. Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you. So that leads us to Order 638, which these are coming in, City Council meeting schedule for 2025.
Okay, sorry. Motion to refer 638 to General Government and Committee of the Whole, 639 and 641 to be continued to 12/16, as well as 642 and 643. And then, motion to refer Order 640 to Budget and Finance and Committee of the Whole.
Second.
Yeah, I'd like to move 639 to PWS.
Okay. No objection.
So let's just, so we're all on the same page here. So in order, 638 would be General Government Committee of the Whole. 639, Rights Court HOA Agreement would be Public Works and Safety. 640, Gift Acceptance Moral Foundation would be Budget and Finance Committee of the Whole. Order 641, Gift Acceptance Port Parks Alliance would be continued to December 16th,
As would 642 and 643.
which are already listed as continued. Yep, great. All right, and so this would be a motion collectively on all 6 of those items. Any discussion?
First and seconded by, thank you.
First and second.
Okay, motion made by Counselor Zede, seconded by Counselor Harmon. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston.
Yes.
Counselor Sheehan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
Counselor Granis. And Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
Very good. I think, Mr. President, that leads us to second readings for the following 3 ordinances. Ordinance 176, zoning ordinance to establish an overlay district.
Motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Roll call.
Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston.
Yes.
Counselor Sheehan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
And Counselor Granis.
Yes.
And Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you. That would also likewise lead us to second reading for ordinance 184, which is the Newburyport MBTA 40R zoning amendment.
Motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. Roll call.
On second reading for ordinance 184, Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston. Counselor Sheehan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
Counselor Granis.
Yes.
And Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
Likewise, ordinance 186, second reading, amending Chapter 13-168, no parking restrictions on various streets.
Motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Motion made by Counselor Harmon, seconded by Counselor McCauley. Roll call.
Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston.
Yes.
Counselor Sheehan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
Counselor Granis. Counselor Cameron.
Yes. Well, shockingly agreeable tonight we are.
Don't jinx it.
Sounds like a jinx to me.
Counselor Zede.
Yeah, let me help with that. Okay. Motion to approve ordinance 178-9924, which is the affordable housing property tax exemption,
Second.
as amended in committee. Thank you. So
Discussion,
the
yep.
committee had, the committee had 3 meetings on this, culminating on 11/14, And first, I would just introduce what this ordinance is. This ordinance is to allow for a property tax exemption to properties that meet certain requirements, in particular deed-restricted, affordable, at a certain AMI level, and I'll get into those details in a moment. I want to note that this is essentially an acceptance of a local option, if you will. We have done these in the past, so it originates from, as the title states, the section and chapter 59 and so forth from state law. It is a relatively new part of state law. I want to say it's existed for about 2, maybe 3 years or so it's a relatively new advent. So there hasn't previously been available to municipalities an option to do this other than perhaps to do a home rule petition, which we have a little bit of experience with and is typically a very lengthy process. So the sponsors brought this forward in an effort to adopt that local option, and the local option, again, is to create that exemption. The city actually has a number of exemptions that range, and people can apply. The assessor's office has a nice chart of these different things, and if you're able to qualify, you can participate. So this one in particular is around affordable housing. So the idea is that if a property is deed restricted and the AMI is 50% or lower, AMI stands for average median income, which is a term we've become more familiar with in the past year or so, then they would be able to apply for this exemption. And if they met all the qualifications that are stipulated and filled out the application correctly, which would go, by the way, to the assessor's office, then they would be able to avail themselves of this property tax exemption. It is a full property tax exemption, meaning that those units would be essentially tax exempt. It does get more complicated because oftentimes these units can be co-located in a larger building that has more units than just the affordable ones. So effectively, to keep it relatively simple for this evening, it ends up being a pro rata share based on the square footage of the units that are present that meet, again, the qualifications. In terms of the learning of the committee, I think we did learn a lot. We always learn a lot, I think, when we talk about assessments because it's never super easy to understand. But long story short is, obviously there are numerous ways that an assessment gets created for a property, and in part the usage is part of that. And so we learned that there are essentially 2 major qualifications. One is being a nonprofit, and the second one is, quote, occupying the building. And those 2 can lead already, absent this local option acceptance, could lead to property taxes being exempted for that. That, I guess, has become an area of discussion or an area of perhaps change over the past years. There's been one property that's been mentioned in particular, although this proposal is a broad-based one, but there's been one that's been mentioned in particular, and I guess that it had been receiving that exemption under those 2 for many years. And then for 2 reasons. One is it was removed from its nonprofit home and relocated into an LLC. Whatever the purposes of that may have been, that was the reality of what happened. And then secondarily, there's been some consideration of the interpretation of what occupying the building means. So we did spend a good amount of time diving into what changed. You heard today in public comment that some weren't being assessed taxes and then they were, and we were trying to understand why that occurred. And that, at least for that property, is what we determined. There were honestly other properties in particular that seemed to have questions where the person maybe thought they should be able to either avail themselves of this or some other ones. But in order to try and keep off the rails of individual properties and hashing that out here tonight, I think there's better venues for that. I just wanted to explain that. The second thing is there was a lot of conversation about how the actual assessment is arrived to, and we did learn that deed restrictions and so forth do have an impact on assessment, and there's always the abatement process if anyone really at any rate feels that their assessment is not correct or not accurate or fair. And that typically gets done through the city, and then if you still disagree, you obviously have appeal rights, as is common with most things. So turning inward a little bit into the actual sort of contours of this proposal, it came in with a sort of an ask of exempting those that were 60% AMI or lower. Again, we had a lot of conversation. 3 meetings is a good amount of time for us, and in the end, we did bat around a couple of options for amendments. One was to reduce that AMI to 30%. So that would have been the threshold, so 30% or lower. And I think, just to cut to the chase, we sort of ended up with a compromise at 50% AMI. So that's really the amended. As amended, there are 4 places in the ordinance where it specified 60%. That was reduced to 50. I think the general rationale around reducing to 50 was coming off the line with the inclusionary, which, as we know, is 60% for projects that trigger that, and then B, trying to frankly balance out This is definitely there's competition here in the sense between different interests. As you might imagine, as with any ordinance, the sponsors through I think the assessor and the finance, they estimated maybe this could be around $150,000 impact on the budget, and want to be clear that that essentially needs to come from somewhere. In this case, it really will need to come really directly from services. This isn't one where it can be made up by simply taxing the remaining taxpayers in the pool more. Granted, it would be $150,000 over all the households if you want to look at it that way, but in this case, that's not really an option. So it would simply be $150. Now, the $150 is just an estimate. With the reduction to 50%, that number may change. The properties have to apply, they have to be approved. So there's these different factors. So it's not possible to know exactly what the dollar figure impact will be. That is subject to all of those different things. But $150,000, I think, is a sensible thing. So in the end, the committee made that amendment 2-0 and then recommended approval coming out 2-0. And hopefully I've covered enough ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Sure.
Councilor Shand?
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to the chair. That's a very good summary of everything. Just to give folks a little bit more history, this actually came out of the not affordable housing, but the Housing Coalition efforts, and the former Councilor Eigerman is the one who actually wrote this for us. He presented this along with the ADU amendment as far as options for us to go forward to support affordable housing in the community, so I just want to thank him for that. What we did in the last meeting was going to the 50%, and I appreciate the concerns folks have as to not really knowing what the numbers are, what we're facing here. But 50% AMI and 50% area median income, let's think about those two things. We already have been batting around what AMI is around here. 100% AMI is $124,000. There are only a few places in town that are doing truly affordable income, rental incomes. And 50% and 30%, it is a small number. So I think the $150,000 that the assessor's office has mentioned is probably where we're at. Regarding requirements, yes, a person has to live there for a year. That is a requirement. A person has to show that they make 50% AMI or less. The renting person has to show that they are renting it at 50% AMI, and they have to have this house on has to be on the subsidized housing inventory list. All of these are a lot of requirements that I think we're probably going to be starting off small here. Appreciate the comments that were made tonight. I do want to state the fact that this is not HARP. This is not the Kaplan project. Those are all 80% and more. This is none of those projects, including what we have over at 1 and 3 Boston Way. This is not impacting any of them. This is purely impacting just those that are renting at the 50% and less and have it on the subsidized housing. So just letting folks know, and also if you look at the state allowance here, this is only for 3 years. If after 3 years we feel like this is not working for us, we can always go back. But right now this is just a 3-year started period. So with that, I appreciate the work that was done in committee, and hopefully we can move forward with this. Thank you. I will defer to my other sponsor.
Councilor Preston.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to say the committee chair, as well as my co-sponsor, has really covered a lot of the points that I wanted to make. But so I wanted to also publicly acknowledge former Councilor Eigerman for his work on this, particularly because, there's been a little bit of news, I guess, around Councilor Eigerman and his potential bias against the Y. And I think it's really important to understand here that not only was Mr. Eigerman serving on the Affordable Housing Coalition, which is sponsored by and hosted by the Y, he wrote legislation to particularly save the Y. As we've heard from some of the public comments, I mean, the Y was really struggling, and even Mr. Fian said that potentially would not be able to remain viable if it were not for this legislation. And so I think it's really important, as Mr. Eigerman has been vilified as being against the Y, to really show the work that he's actually done so strongly in support of the Y. I'm really happy to have my particular name on this. I think the Y is an organization that does really fantastic work in this city. Even they're housing our most vulnerable residents. They're housing women escaping domestic violence, which is something that's very important to me as for my work with the Jeannie Geiger Crisis Center. So, I'm really happy to put my name on this. There is going to be a cost in loss of revenue for these homes, but from these particular units, but I think that is well worth the cost to be able to keep not only the WISE units viable, but also to hopefully stimulate more affordable, deeply affordable housing in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Discussion? Councilor McCauley?
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I found the debate very educational. What's instructive here is that affordable housing is subsidized. It's subsidized by the federal government, the state, and by other residents that may live in the building going forward. I am not going to support this effort, and I saw in the debate as part of this that these places are run as businesses, and there's only one that's been mentioned a lot that's had struggles with this. Everyone else is running a business. It's a low-margin business, granted, and there's no guarantee that this tax rate will be passed on to the individuals. You can make an argument that it'll be reinvested in the home, et cetera, along the way, but I do think there's a better way, a more direct way for them to get assistance with that. And we did mention that it's not NED, it's not CARP, it's not nothing like that, but if somehow the development at the Brown School went to the Y, then many of those units would be non-taxable and tax exempt as well. The income approach is, we heard tonight that the property is being listed at market rate, when actually it's being listed as income approach, which the lower it evaluates the rents that you pay, the lower the rents that you pay, the lower the assessment should be on the property going forward. There are some forms to fill out and all that, but we heard that from the assessor, et cetera, along the way. I do think the better alternative to this is to apply for relief from the Affordable Housing Trust. Their charter is to create and maintain units, deeply affordable units. This past year, as part of the CPA process, Market Street from the Y obtained $15,000 or so to upgrade and maintain their house. It came out of the Affordable Housing Trust allotment that we would have given them in CPA. So I do think there's a pathway to that. I do think the Affordable Trust has money for that. Last count, I believe they've got 1.1 million. 400 of it is encumbered, so they do have about $700,000 to be able to offer to those people who do need tax relief. And I say that because as we move forward and we talk about the taxes and the impact that it's going to have going forward, is we may just find that we don't have as much money as we think we do. So therefore, I do think it's a worthwhile endeavor for us to propose it. I think it's even better that we're debating it and can debate this kind of subject. It's not to say this isn't worthwhile, but when push comes to shove, I'm going to say no tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. And yes, definitely I think this is an excellent conversation and good points raised, especially from the councilor from Ward 5. And I was wondering if I could ask a couple of questions from Ethan and our tax assessor too, in terms of, and maybe it was said, and if I could just get clarification. One is the Affordable Housing Trust, which we do give CPC money for, and maybe Ethan might be able to answer this. Is there any restriction on the use of the funds? Like, can they use them for tax relief, whether it's for residents or housing such as the ones we're talking about for the tax exemption?
So, excuse me, affordable housing trusts fall under their own section of the law. It really goes back to the declaration of trust that formed that. Typically, I don't believe you'd see trusts spend their money on these types of relief programs, nor am I certain that they'd be allowed to. But it would really be, looking at the statute and the trust documents to get a better understanding of what we can and cannot do within that trust.
Okay, thank you. So we don't really, maybe some questions we'd have to ask, because we don't know if previously we've helped with property taxes too, with anyone who qualifies or came to them from a...
I'm not aware of any taxes that have been relieved through the Affordable Housing Tax Trust, nor am I aware of any relief that's available through the law to tap into that as a potential source of revenue for that.
Okay. And that's not definite, but we could look into it as we continue these conversations. Okay, thank you. The other question I had is, and this is now for our tax assessor, in terms of, in other jurisdictions, in terms of assessments, market rate versus if someone had affordable rentals, is there any other formula? And I feel like I may have heard something. Is there a different formula applied for tax collection, or is it the same?
Meaning?
So if let's say there's we've talked about multifamily condos and different kind of classes, setting those rates for those facilities. But for example, let's take, if we were to look at the Kmart site, and if that became, if it's going to be the 212 units, and we have 80% AMI, in terms of without, that wouldn't affect this because this is 50% AMI. But is the property taxes assessed the same calculation? You don't really pull out the affordable and make it a different kind of analysis, or do you?
Right. What the owner has to file with us is to tell us how many units are affordable and what those rents are. So the rents are used, okay, in determining a value.
Got it. And
So
thank
it
you
is
for that
used.
clarification. So if for the WISE facility or build of the 10, I'm giving that as an example, the YW, and then even cottage, we have a cottage court, and it's really the rentals that are
Yes,
used
it's only
for-
lease property that we
Okay.
use for the income approach, yes.
Excellent. And then the
Okay.
145,000, kind of, we got something, all the counselors here, to get an idea of what the magnitude would be in terms of what the city would not be collecting anymore. So that 145,000 reflects that, combination of all the rentals of what they are, right?
Yes, that's how we calculated it, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then
And can I just say, that's on apartment buildings too, commercial apartment buildings.
Okay.
Okay, because we do have affordable units that sell, like a residential condominium unit, okay? So that is deed restricted though.
Got it.
And that shows us how much we can assess actually in the deed rider that's attached to the deed.
Okay.
So it depends on the type of property.
Right.
But we're talking about apartment buildings, commercial apartment buildings with this ordinance.
Okay. Great, and then I'll just thank you very much. Really
Okay.
appreciate it. Sure. This is, obviously, we're learning so much here. There are different, a lot of things that we're trying to figure out as we're dealing with what we know is a tough time for all residents. We're going to be talking about the tax rate and setting that. So I really do, one of the things that, as we look at housing production, what is our community hoping to gain by the types and numbers of rentals that we're putting in the city, I think one of the reasons that, these are very valid points, but I think one of the reasons I will support this exemption is mainly factored around trying to change the way the growth has been for deeply affordable rentals in our city. We're going to talk a little bit later too about a resolution of, giving, talking about a relief that is, we're doing on the privilege fee, and I'm not going to call it relief, but a way to kind of help developers when needed. And I know there's other ways too. We work and sign development agreements with market rate or developers that will be coming away with a lot. There's a lot of negotiations done. We don't tend to spend that much time at the table negotiating when it's deeply affordable, partly because there is the subsidized component of you really cannot build without having to get additional dollars, costs, assistance. That's just a known factor. And I think it just comes down to the philosophy of the city. What are we looking for in growth of rentals and the opportunity to really house a broader spectrum of folks in Newburyport? And for me, that is a mission that I strongly believe in. And I do think that if this could provide relief, I like the compromise of 50% AMI. I think that really would be a place to really hone in growing the stock of rentals in the city. I see this as really doing a benefit, and a benefit that maybe doesn't translate to how we're talking about the dollars we're trying to get here and there. There is benefits, and the public benefit in this is really truly related to giving back to our community. The people that are giving back in many other ways that may not translate into direct a dollar amount, but it really does create a richer environment in general here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none and seeing none online, we'll go to a roll call on.
First reading, ordinance 178. Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley. Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
10-1, ordinance passes first reading.
Motion to approve Order 616.
Second.
This is a FY25 spending fund limit increase. This specifically refers to one fund. It's the City Hall Fund. As you know, each year we do set a credit limit, if you will, for each revolving fund. Revolving funds have money that typically come in from things like user fees, and then we set the limit on spending. In this case, we're referring to the City Hall Fund. Primarily, people who are paying into this fund are those who are using this building, say if they're renting out the auditorium above us or using another room and paying towards that. And it's a fairly low dollar revolving fund in the grand scheme of things. And I think there's two things at play here. First is that the fund is about $7,800 is the current balance in it, and that's pending paying a $6,000 bill that was encumbered to replace the curtain upstairs in the auditorium. So once that's done, there'll be about $1,700 left in the fund, and they'll basically deplete the credit limit. And so that leads to the second thing, which is we did ask a little bit about the mold remediation or discussion project that's happening at City Hall, and if this would be considered a funding source. We were told they are working through that, as you probably heard in the mayor's updates. They've been doing assessments and so forth on the building. There's an insurance claim in play, and there may be some additional funds that are needed. Whether they could come from here or not remains to be seen, but frankly, at the end of the day, that this isn't a blockbuster fund that has hundreds of thousands of dollars in it. So the ask was to increase the spending limit. Again, these are set annually, so this would be an FY25, the current fiscal year, and would be subject to further debate or reset or continue on the same path, commencing when we do the next round of these for the next fiscal year. And I should obviously say the current limit's $5,000. The request is to go to 15. So again, that's the limit. This isn't a transfer per se. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was 2-0 in committee.
Okay. Any further discussion on Order 616? Councilor McCauley?
Thank you, Council President. I will support this limit, but I would like to see it reset after this year. And we can either insert language here that it's reset, or we can do it during budget period. I'll ask the Chair of Budget and Finance what's the most expedient way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there will have to be a new order setting the rate, that again, so it is, everything's automatically reset in a sense each fiscal year. The funds always stay in existence. We did that by ordinance some years ago, but there'll be a new order maybe in June or so, July typically, and it will say the FY26 spending limits are this. So I do think it's fair to leave a breadcrumb for the administration that at least one councilor, and I would tend to agree for what it's worth, that it'd be nice to put it back to 5. It seemed like the curtain was a one-time-ish kind of thing. But you'll get a bite at the apple when we get that next order.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on Order 616? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Council Preston.
Yes.
Council Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to approve Order 617. Second. This is the gift acceptance of the David McPhail books. So this is a $1,500 gift acceptance. It's not a cash donation, but rather 150 or so first edition books. David McPhail is a Newburyport native and children's author. The collection, I guess, has not a precise value. It's $1,500 to $3,000 value. I think generally, to summarize the committee's discussions, everybody was thankful and appreciative. The primary question came around where these would be stored in the library. We did talk about that in committee, but we needed to ask that question. We did ask that question in administration. The library director came back to us and said that given the archival nature of these, they will be stored in the archive center, but they can certainly make appearances in the children's area of the library. These are not books that you would pick up and read. They are first editions, as they say, so they're sort of more gentle than that. So they did anticipate keeping them in the archival center. The committee did vote 2-0 to recommend approval, and that was the answer that we received by email. I believe everybody got a copy of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I wasn't able to make our meeting, and I just had a couple of questions. I should have watched it, but did they talk about the criteria for the archival center? And I know I think all of us got emails, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the response to the emails regarding the use of the archival center versus the children's room. Was that at all discussed?
When you say the use, do you mean like why something should go there? Okay.
And the removal, sorry, if you could cover the letter items. I don't know if you got a chance to.
I only have maybe I'm missing something. I only have the email that just says, it will be stored in the archival center and it can make appearances. Did I miss something, perhaps? It's possible I missed something. If you know, I welcome any help, but I have an email dated 11/21 at 3:29 p.m. That's the one email I have.
Okay, so so let me just finish up. I don't want to hold people up.
Apologies.
If we could, and I don't know if it just came to a few of us, but one of the issues that arose was the archival center had a very specific nature of the type of materials. And I know we've heard there's been the removal of several items and trying to get documentation. And so a lot of some of the emails we got, and again, my apologies for not being there at the meeting, but I think one of the things I would have tried to find out is the library's policies, which I know they've worked on and try to refine to make it very clear on what would be where. So if that has not been addressed, I don't want to stop this being accepted. All I would ask is it would be helpful to get a response to the emails that we did get from residents on getting some of those questions answered would be helpful. Thank you.
I mean, the only email I see that went to the full council was from Ethan Manning, November 18th.
Yeah, I gave the wrong date. Sorry, I was looking at a different one.
I mean, I
Yeah,
can read
Ethan.
that if that's helping anybody. From Ethan Manning to City Council, CC Sean Reardon, Kevin Bork, CC'd as well. Councilors, this again from Ethan, during the last Budget and Finance Committee meeting, you inquired whether the donated collection of over 150 first edition books by Newburyport native David McPhail could be safely stored or displayed in the children's room instead of the library's archival center. I discussed this with head librarian Kevin Bork. Kevin confirmed that the archival center is the most suitable location to ensure the preservation of these books for future generations. The children's room is not equipped to safely house such valuable materials. However, the library is happy to display parts of the collection in the children's room at various times, such as during significant dates in David McPhail's life or as part of a thematic exhibits on local authors. Please note that these books are not for circulation to maintain their condition. If further clarification is needed, please feel free to reach out. That's from Ethan. So, Councilor Donahue.
Thank you. Yes, I think maybe a little clarity. I think the email that the at-large councilor is referring to is maybe the ones that we got from some residents that maybe all of us didn't get or didn't read. But I believe that the issue is that we don't necessarily know what's happening with the items that are being stored in the archival center, in that there are
items that have been donated to the archival center that have since disappeared or been sent to other locations, and unanswered questions have arisen. So I think maybe the at-large counselor is getting at is it would be nice to have a policy from the library on exactly what they're doing with everything in the archival center at this time and how they're storing things. I think might be helpful to understand, because there were some resident emails with those concerns that did come to at least, I mean, it came to the city council email, so I don't know, like I said, how many people actually opened it, but I do recall reading at least one that was of that nature, so just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Councilor Khan?
Yeah, it was November 12th, sorry, just to give. And I just want to say one last thing on this. I think the reason is that access. So if the public is going to have access, and that's why the children's reading room was suggested, that it cannot be checked out, but at least it could be enjoyed by the public, whereas the archival center has a very different audience and way of operation, including ours. So all I ask is, we accept the gift. I will, accept that. But I would just make a statement that I do hope the library and they consider making this somewhat available to the public, but not by having to access the archival. So, yeah, but November 12th, and we did all get the email. I just checked it. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, roll call on Order 617, gift acceptance.
Councilor Harmon. Yes. Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
And Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion to approve Order 620.
Second.
620 is a grant acceptance, $50,000. This is a grant acceptance from DOER, which is the Department of Energy Resources, the Green Communities Division, and it's a $50,000 grant really towards helping elders understand and access green energy options. So our understanding from the committee and as the finance director, explained to us, they're working with a group called Mass Energized. It's a 9-month campaign primarily focused around education and awareness. The target is to find folks who are 60 years old and older. And essentially, what does the money go towards? Well, there's part of it goes through a program manager. Our understanding is that program manager is not an individual of the city employment per se, but I think is from that group, Mass Energize. That said, our counterpart here would, of course, be our Energy and Sustainability Office, who will contribute some in-kind assistance and just sort of time and things like that. And then some of the funds go towards software and marketing. And again, the goal is to create a greater awareness. And so there's no financial match, no ongoing commitment beyond the end of the grant. There's going to be some staff time involved. And I should mention, besides Energy and Sustainability, COA is also expected to probably help coordinate some of these events as they would logically happen at the Senior and Community Center. It was 2-0 in committee to accept.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. So roll call on Order 620.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
All right. Motion to approve Transfer 201.
Second.
Transfer 201 is a $150,000 transfer to health insurance premiums coming from the general fund, water, sewer, and harbor master funds in proportion. We did hear a little bit about this before, but basically, long story short, is MedX, which is one of the city's health insurance plans. The renewal came in roughly in the last month or so, and it unfortunately calls for a 20% increase starting on 1/1/25. It was not anticipated, perhaps could not have been anticipated at the beginning of the fiscal year, so there simply is not sufficient funding available to make that 20% increase, and it's going to be here in a month or so. And so because of that, there was a need to make this transfer. The general fund portion is coming from free cash. The other three, are coming from retained earnings from each of the enterprise funds respectively. And again, those are in proportion to the number of employees they have, which is basically how we do all of the health insurance. Unfortunately, more bad news, but the $150,000 is a 6-month impact because it starts on 1/1/25, so we have to make up the gap from 1 until 6, January to June, and then the fiscal year will roll over. So the 20% is a $300,000 hit on an annual basis, which is not great, but it is what it is. And so we did get into a bit of a conversation that I think the council, or at least the committee, hasn't had in some time, and that's a little bit about the nature of how the city offers health insurance. And some veteran councils will remember the Public Employees Committee, the PEC, PEC as it's often referred to. So we got a little bit of a refresher on that and discussion about how that is or isn't being necessarily woven into some of the labor contracts that we're currently working on. And perhaps that's an area for further conversation. Again, councilors who were here will remember some tough conversations around that in the past. And then we finally got into a little bit of OPEB, the other pension and employment benefits that we talk about often that are quite daunting at times. So in the end, this is an ongoing obligation of the city that's been agreed to really to provide this health insurance. So the committee voted 2-0, and but you get a little picture of what's to come.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment on transfer 201? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon, excuse me.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion to approve transfer 202. Second. 202 is another free cash transfer. It's $56,000 in total, going to 3 different places. Interest on short-term notes, $27K, elections, $8, and fire maintenance, fire alarms, $21. I just remind the council we did dispose of the $8,000 aspect of this transfer just before the presidential election a month ago or so. But we do have the 2 remaining pieces, so I'll just explain briefly on those. On the $27K for short-term notes, we ended up with a end-of-year fiscal timing challenge, specifically with the bulkhead project. So as councilors will probably recall, the bulkhead was funded in good part by federal grants, and unfortunately, they don't always come, literally, the money doesn't always come when you want it to come in terms of timing, and that forced the finance director and the treasurer's office to have to issue a short-term note to bridge the gap. They are permitted to do that without a bond authorization by the council. That's baked into state law in order to basically be able to pay vendors on time and then wait for and you basically collateralize the debt with the expectation of the grant, hence Grant Anticipation Note, GAN. So $27K is that. Our understanding in committee is that the funds have been received since that time. The short-term note has been retired. The interest, of course, needs to be paid, so that's the $27K. There is not sufficient funding in that line, so that's why the need for the transfer. Now, moving on to fire alarms. These are our old friends, the fire alarm boxes that are around town. This is a very old system, but it does work for the most part, but on occasion it does need a little bit of repair or replacement. 337 master boxes, as you see. It's one of those weird ones. Those who have these boxes do pay a fee to the city, so it generates about $82,000 per year of revenue. I think this actually was a topic of discussion during the budget. Are we going to retire this at some point? The answer is a definite maybe. So, and in terms of when, we don't know exactly, but right now it's sort of cash flow positive, if you will. This $21,000 isn't like a recurring theme. It just broke and it needed to be fixed. They fixed it, and now they need the 21. And the $82K is general fund revenue, so there is a match between where the money comes in and where the money's coming out, which is free cash. So 2-0 in committee on this one.
Thank you. Any further discussion on transfer 202? Okay, hearing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright. Yes. Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
All right, next is, so Order 630 is the residential tax factor. It is already out on the floor because it was voted as such on the consent, so I'm going to start with a motion to amend to insert 1.0 into the blank space.
Second.
So I just want to get that out on the floor to get the conversation going. It is a blank space, and that's customarily how it's always been done. But it did come with you have the administration's recommendation of 1.0, so I thought we could start with that in terms of a debate. So let me talk to you a little bit about both the tax classification hearing that we held last Thursday, as well as the committee discussion specifically on the residential tax factor as best I can. So I wanted to address, so we took this into committee on 11/12, which is a Tuesday, and then we had the conversation on it on 11/21. That was a Tuesday to Thursday flip. That's the fastest we could do it and still meet all of the posting requirements. So we did hold the tax classification hearing. That is required, and that's Chapter 40, Section 56, and that was posted. We did have 2 public commenters speaking largely in favor of a split tax rate, and then we closed the hearing. Those were the conversations that we had. So that was held on 11/21 at 6 o'clock. And then following immediately that, we had our Budget and Finance Committee meeting. We had a very wide-ranging conversation, as we often do with these. We did have a presentation from Ethan Manning, the Finance Director. That's been posted to the meeting if you would like to review it, where the recommendations are presented as well as sort of a whole bunch of scenario analyses and all kinds of other data that may be helpful to you. So the CIP shift, and I struggle to use CIP just so I don't confuse anybody. CIP in this case, commercial and industrial property, not capital improvement plan. So this really refers to whether residences and commercial properties and industrial properties will pay the same or different rates. The city of Newburyport has had a rate of 1.0, a factor of 1.0, for about 2 decades or so. We did talk, I think we determined sometime in the 80s was the last time the city had shifted, meaning there was a split rate or a rate that was different between residents and commercial, and it has not been done since. Councilors, we did then recount in committee conversation we had, I think it was alluded to in public comment a couple of years ago, where there was a substantive and robust conversation around this, and we returned back, frankly, to some of the same themes around what level of commercial is typically looked at in order to justify a split tax rate. We did have some very helpful information presented in terms of other communities that may choose to split, and that it is something that any community can consider. And we also learned that you can split the rate in either direction. So, and actually I was surprised to find and learn from a resident that there are some communities that actually shift towards commercial, meaning residents pay a higher rate. So to try and, again, keep a very long story short on the factor, we've had a couple of anomalistic years with data where the rate of residential increase has been extremely steep, and the commercial has also been increasing, but at a much less rate. And the difference between those two in the rate of increase has created an odd situation where residential property taxes are going up. Maybe that's not that odd, but commercial property taxes have actually either been flat or going down. And that is the case that we find ourselves in this year. And we found ourselves in last year as well. And there's some trend data that we did look at a little bit in committee, and can talk about that in a moment. And so we continued down this conversation path and, tried to see, frankly, if there was going to be an interest in a tax shift that was not, or in a factor that was not 1.0. No such amendment was made in committee. Again, I put the 1.0 out here for conversation. And so just to complete on this as best as I can, a residential factor shift would mean that we would basically be imbalancing the 2 rates between the 2 classes of property. It could be a way to consider, if we wanted to blunt some of the increase in the residential. And then the longer term conversation was, then what? Are you able to go back? There is no legal lock, if you will, like we talked about in the property tax exemption. There's a 3-year window with that. This is not like that. There's no legal reason you can't go back. There may be numerical or other reasons that you can't go back that make it harder if, again, you have these odd years, and it could create a much higher increase on residential in that year. And then we also finally talked about process. It was not recommended to shift by the administration, so it didn't get a lot of conversation. I'm always happy to host more meetings, but as I mentioned, we basically turned this around, and we are between 2 rocks and a hard place. You have to have the assessments come in from the assessor on the one end, and you already have the budget from June, and then you have to set the taxes before the end of November, because tax bills have to go out. So We do endeavor to do the best we can. Certainly, if there's ways we can do it better or allow for more time or debate, that would be great. I do remind folks a lot of this conversation goes back to the budget. So I did the best I could. The committee really didn't have a recommendation. As was customary in the past, we sent this out without a recommendation and leave it to the broad council here to hash it out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zede. Any discussion? Councillor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. Yeah, it was a good conversation on is this something we should be entertaining? And I think we went through the conversation, and I'm looking at, actually, thank you, I think, Council President, you were trying to put the slide deck, and it was a great slide deck. It's actually, it was in our packet. Was this ever in our packet? I just want to make sure the public can see this, but it provides the different viewpoints in terms of seeing all the considerations that the committee had, that the other members of the council, as council of the whole, we had a lot of information that looked at the scenarios and how would that really impact and maybe shift the burden, so to speak. But the one thing that resonates with me on the movement, if we are to depart from what we've been doing, which is a 1.0, is that it really does involve more than, I think, just this body. It has to be done in coordination with the administration's support in terms of getting us maybe some insight into one community that is important to consider, and that's definitely our businesses here in Newburyport, as well as the commercial and industrial park folks. But there is an important aspect of just coming together and being able to understand and appreciate if we are to provide this type of shift of the going from 1.0 to something else, and we talked about 0.05 as an option, it would really need to be presented in a way that we can all understand, where is this going? Does this make sense? How are other communities, their rule of thumb? And in looking at one of the slides is, you could see in terms of total valuations, when everything's assessed, the residential class 1 and 2 is 90% of the total valuations, and we have 9.9, close to 10% of the CNI. And I think one of the things that we were discussing and bringing up is in terms of other municipalities and the percentage that they have in valuations of commercial property. So I don't think it's like completely off the table to entertain it. I'm open to definitely making sure that if we do this action, it makes sense, and we are going in a direction that would not end up hurting our community. So for me, I was very comfortable with supporting 1.0, but I do think that we should be looking and answering, I guess, these questions better, and bringing in the folks that can kind of best maybe educate us maybe on like how does it really get passed through. Again, I'm looking at small businesses, at the large industrial park as well, in terms of what their properties are assessed. And I do have a question after all that comment. I am going to support 1.0, but it did bring up something that I want to ask the tax assessor in terms of commercial properties and new growth. You know, we talk about new growth. We hear a lot in residential, and we get one number. Do we know new growth percentage for commercial, or is it a separate type of review that's looking at for new growth? I was just curious about that.
So new growth is based on value that is picked up from building permit activity. So there's not a percentage we put on. You know, it depends on what improvement is done to that property. But I can foresee if we had a project like at Port Plaza, it's a large growth amount. Okay? So it's not a percentage across the board. It's just the value that an improvement that someone makes to their property is added to the assessment.
And then, okay, and that's a great example. So currently, if you did want to see from the commercial properties, it's not a big percentage as opposed to residential new growth in terms of the number we see here.
That's correct.
Currently,
Right.
but
Yes.
that could be another factor.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Because you don't see commercial properties taking out many building permits,
Right.
you know, to add on, or, so that's why it's more the residential side each year.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay. So we have a motion on for Order 630 for the residential factor to be 1.0.
Just the amendment, I think, is on the floor right now, just to insert 1.0. I didn't do it combo because I didn't know the debate was, so.
Macaulay?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I'm not here to muddy the water. I'll support the amendment to insert 1. But the discussion that we tended to have at the committee meeting, right, just some factoids here, is that the average residential bill is $9,400. The average commercial bill is $14,300. And the average industrial bill is $26,700. So while we talk about percentages in terms of real dollars, each of these entities are paying more than the average, let's say, than the residential. Residential far outweighs them in total going forward. But the discussion about a split tax rate was really a secondary conversation to say, how do we get to a lower tax rate than what's proposed at 9.62? And if we propose to, let's say, spend some free cash of, let's say, according to the charts, $330,000, that gets us to 9.58, which is less than 9.62, but not, it's incrementally less. But by shifting the tax rate of 0.05%, it gets us to the same tax rate without the investment of free cash. And I think that was really the debate more than anything else, that we started with the end game and tried to reverse engineer how do we get to 9.58 versus starting at 1 and then, trying to figure out how much money we wanted to invest back into the tax rate, et cetera, along the way. So, as I said, it's just sharing some information, and I will support the amendment for 1.
Okay. So the amendment on the floor is to make the residential factor 1.0. That was made by Councilor Zede and seconded by Councilor Harmon. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call.
Councilor Harmon?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes. Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Granis?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion to approve as amended?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Roll call.
Roll
So
call on approving as amended as in factor 1.0 for fiscal year 2025. Councilor Harmon?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Granis?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
yes. Councilor Zede?
All right, councilors, we'll open this one the same way. Order 631 is already on the floor, so open with a motion to amend to insert $9.62 into each of the open spaces.
Second.
Okay, so a little bit of a continuation of the committee's conversation. So I guess, at the risk of being a broken record, just to explain how this works really quickly again. So we have basically two numbers. We have a budgetary figure. This is how much we need to fund the city of Newburyport's government. We decided on that back in June, and that is the numerator. And then as we have a new denominator every year, which is the assessor's total assessed value for all of the property in Newburyport, all classes, residential, commercial, industrial, personal property, all of those things get factored in. And the rate, the $9.62, which is the administration's recommendation, is a simple division between the two. And so, I think a lot of residents sometimes are under the impression that we just say, hey, we think we should get $10 a thousand or $4 a thousand. We're actually just playing with, really, at the end of the day, actually one number, because the tax rate is mathematical. The denominator comes from the assessor. That's not something we decide how much people's properties are worth. Of course, that's subject to the abatement process. So at the end of the day, there's the top line figure, which is the budgetary figure, and that's what really ends up driving this. So I think we spend, correctly, a lot more time discussing average tax bills and increase thereof instead of debating what the actual rate is. because again, really the only option we have to manipulate that is the top line budget. That's how the math works. So $9.62 per thousand is indeed the administration's recommendation. That is and they're going into both boxes because based on a 1.0 factor, that basically would become the same. So what does this really mean? So for the average taxpayer, they're changing average single-family home, just to be very specific. The increase is $498 per year. And Ethan, I know you had the thing up here, but it yields a 5.3% increase over that. And we really started from that point, and then we got into a decent conversation about services and perception and whether that rate of increase is, I don't know, acceptable or unacceptable, and conversations around that. You heard a little bit from the Ward 5 councilor, I think the leading edge of some of the debate we then had. After the shift discussion, what was the utilization of free cash? The committee did discuss the utilization of $330,000, which is not a random figure, but one of the columns presented in the heat maps in the presentation. And if you are following along, that was posted to the November 21st council meeting. To the councilor at large's point, you can pull that up and follow along with us. And we did discuss potentially using that. Then that led into a conversation of obviously free cash, because that is ultimately where the money would come. And so that is really another slide that was presented, which is the potential needs for free cash. And that's page 15 of the PDF.
Just pass it.
And so there are a number of different factors that went into that. Now, at the end of the day, utilization of free cash is an appropriation. An appropriation, as we know from our city charter, must come from the administration, the executive branch. And so we weren't able to motion per se to amend. We didn't receive a late file transfer, which really only means one thing, which there is not a desire, at least on the part of the administration, to utilize the free cash. So 9.62, to my understanding, that's the number, that's what's available to us. If we want to use free cash, we can obviously have continued debate here, but we would need to in some way compel a free cash transfer as an appropriation, and that's not new this year. Last year we had a similar conversation, but we did end up with a compromise on a free cash transfer. So again, 9.62 is the number. It's a 5.3% increase from last year, which equates to $498. That's on the average single family home. Your home may vary. You heard in public comment assessments are available, so you could look those up for yourself and see them. The only last thing I would add is that one thing we did endeavor during this year with the budget was to try and get some forecasting on this, and the finance director did provide, and to his credit, he was pretty close. We talked about 5% increase, and that is indeed what it ended up being. We have also absorbed essentially all the excess levy, and so that's shown in another slide. So no recommendation again from the committee. 9.62 is the recommendation. Defer to my colleagues.
Councilor Harmon, and then Councilor McCauley.
Thank you. Through the chair, I suppose to Director Manning, I'm curious, between Thursday, where we discussed the potential for transfer of free cash, to today, when that didn't materialize, or any other communication that I've seen around this topic, is there anything you can fill us in on in terms of the decision of the administration?
Yes, we've spoken with the mayor. I think he feels strongly that using free cash to set the tax rate is not financially prudent for the city to do at this juncture. I think if you look at the free cash needs that were on that slide, including some needs that aren't on that slide that have come up and are coming up, as you see in the transfers that we've been submitting recently. It just did not make sense to recommend the use of free cash to set the tax rate. I think the mayor realizes that the city does need to set a tax rate, obviously, in a timely manner to get the tax bills out by December 31st. That said, he is currently not recommending any appropriations from free cash.
Thank you. I'll just point out, by way of follow-up, each of the past 2 fiscal years' use of free cash has been part of tax setting. So I guess my takeaway is about 7, 8, 9, almost $1 million over the last 2 fiscal years. So I suppose we're keeping our money in terms of the attitude of the mayor and not, prudence this year, perhaps not prudence in past years.
Councilor McCauley?
Thank you, Council President. In the mayor's update, he had mentioned that he was doubling down on this 1% and 9.62. So that's the only communication we have. We didn't have a chance to have it presented. I have pushed for a lower tax rate every year. I've pushed for an investment of people's money back to them to subsidize them. We often hear things like we leave money on the table, but it's not our money, it's their money. And we need to address, as the Budget and Finance Chair had mentioned, this is an equation, and the only thing that we can impact is spending. We have to rein in spending. We can't affect the appraisals, and the rate is a factor. It's a factor to get to the end. And until we rein in spending, until we control spending, until we get a handle on spending, then we're going to continue to see 5% tax increases year over year over year. And that means it's 22% over the last 4 years, if this passes as is. To me, that's a bit too much. I know some might say it's token, but I will not vote for 9.62. I will vote for 9.58, which calls for $330,000 of investment from free cash. And that free cash, as we talked about, $150,000 is targeted to go to our rainy day fund that's already above the 5% target. So we're adding extra in money that's not actually going to do any work in service to our clients, to our customers, to our residents that we go. In the $1.3 million in free cash capital that was listed, there's a vehicle schedule of $500,000, and I would suggest we take the other $180,000 from that as well, because we did upgrade a number of vehicles, and some of these vehicles are just on the schedule going forward, which should have a number of all the other items that were listed as priorities to be priorities going forward. So that's just how I feel tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Khan, Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, we had a good conversation in committee, and towards the end of it, I think we actually, looking at the breakdown, we have how much we have in free cash right now, 3.5 or 3 point some million, and then the breakdown of how it's projected to be used. I personally came to also that conclusion that, and I really appreciate the conversation from my colleagues here on the council, that there is a desire and an appetite that we can present and provide to residents on some relief, and we recognize that there is a lot being asked of everyone in residents, and we know with water sewer rates, we hear it here right now of raising some of these fees and knowing that we're going to try to that we have to. We hear the reasons why. And so this to me seems like an effort in, and I think as one counselor said it, a token aspect. I think the Budget and Finance Chair was very eloquent in saying, show something. And at the end of the day, it is an exercise in spending. And I think we've said it before, and actually when the public comment folks mentioned is, really looking at how are we currently spending for certain departments and looking at the efficiencies. And I do think there might be some areas for streamlining performance, or not performance, streamlining how maybe we are spending certain aspects within the city. So I like the proposed amount here of, and again, I'm looking at the table that was in the slide deck from Ethan that actually provides how much free cash it can be done, and this would be a 2% increase, the 330,087 would fall into that category, which would make it a $9.58, and I think that's a fair a fair way to actually provide that relief. And looking again, the breakdown of how we're spending, I feel like it's something we can do. It will mean that we have to look and see some of those, either whether it's in the capital or some of the other areas, on when we get those bids, what they really look like. It could be a lot lower. So I would be in favor of that. I don't know if we need to propose it, but I look forward to the other debate here.
Okay, further discussion. So nobody's made any amendment to the amendment yet. Councilor Wright.
So I think it's, I think we should note that the administration has imposed a change in policy, specifically around capital projects, where they've increased it from where it was before to now 2.5% of revenue. That's an administration decision that they've made, but it's hidden in here. We haven't had a debate about that policy change. We haven't had an opportunity to discuss that with the residents, who ultimately are the ones that are going to pay for this. So I'm not in favor of doing that, projecting what our cash is going to be, free cash is going to be, without having a specific conversation around the policy change. So I won't be supporting the dollar amount that's being presented. I would like to see an amendment, and I'll make it on the floor if necessary, to where we do use the free cash. Because we haven't had the policy debate about increasing the amount of capital that we're going to set aside for capital projects. So let's have that debate, but let's not handcuff ourselves now so that it becomes something that we can't talk about.
I'm going to say what I'm going to say.
Go ahead.
I think Council Zeid's point's well taken, that the last time we had two motions to amend colliding with themselves on the floor, because they're both the same order of precedence, that we should dispose of one before we do the second one. Do you agree?
It's fine. I do, but I mean, it's the same debate.
Clearer.
Councilor Zeid.
Can I speak on, is it okay
Sure.
to speak on the matter? So I guess, you know, I've been chair now of budget for several years. I've been through several cycles of this, come to this point so many times, and it's just, it is a day of gestures, really. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is, because we already baked the cake, we already had the budget, we created it, it has to be funded. Free cash, we haven't been able to break the cycle of how we build and then spend free cash, and that makes the budgeting challenging. And you know, at different times, even the council has different policies and priorities, and the moods shift, and that's not, in my opinion, a great way to do capital, because capital doesn't sleep. Whether you have a bad day or a good day, it's still depreciating on you. But I guess what I want to say is really that this, first of all, as usual, to give the finance director credit, the presentation's fantastic. You can't ask for more data or information. Unfortunately, though, to me, it doesn't tell a great story. And I'm not looking at 1 year. I always look at trend. I think you always have to have some room for, you know, things are going up or down or whatever. But we basically, if you look at the last several years, we're talking about absorbing. We used to have excess levy capacity, meaning we could tax up to here, but we only chose to tax up to here. And we were able to balance those budgets in those years. That's gone. So we're sort of right up on the max of what we can levy. The capital list is really challenging to wrap your head around. We get good news, and it's also bad news. We get the SOI for the schools, we feel good, but then we realize we've got to pay, and we feel bad because we don't actually know how or where we're going to fund that from. So in previous years, this conversation about this specific question has devolved into question about it'll go to this project. No, it'll go to and actually nobody knows that that's true or can even make that argument. Secondarily, when you look at trend on the increase on taxes, I mean, you know, the last several years have all been 5+%, and it's not common to put on a ward hat for this debate because it's such a citywide discussion, but Ward 1, just the way the assessments have been going, and it's not a knock on the assessments, it's just we've had some incredibly high cost turnover, and Ward 1's getting absolutely demolished in terms of price increases, and I know there are individual neighborhoods that will see much more than 5.3%. That's the average, so just by nature, half people will be higher than 5.3%. And so at the end of the day, I'm just not looking at a good story of one that says, okay, we've got the bandwidth to pick up all the projects we want to do and that we even know how we're going to fund them. And so the way I look at the free cash thing is you could come to the end conclusion on my speech either way. You could say, well, if you don't know what's going to happen, you should hold your money. But the way I look at it is if we can't get it together, so to say, and explain this to residents, why we let free cash fall and we actually don't know exactly where it's go, then I prefer the gesture, and I have in years past, so I'm consistent on this, to just say, yes, it's not going to change your life to go from 962 to 958, but at least we're showing something. And just so you know, a 5% shift in the CIP would have had, as Councilor McCauley described it in the rates, would have given the same relief, but at the cost of a much bigger and longer policy discussion than the one-time utilization of free cash. So I am a little frustrated that I thought 330 was a pretty modest ask. I could always ask for more and then hope to settle at 330, but I just said 330 in committee hoping that we could do it. I do hope there, as a maybe hardline negotiator, I heard some give in the finance director's comments that maybe we could just get this done tonight so we can be out of here. The mechanics of that are a little bit escaping me, but we probably would just amend it and we'd have to get a transfer to backfill it in the next meeting because it's too late to late file for tonight unless that time machine we talked about last week exists. So that would be my thought. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor McCauley?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to replace the 962 with 958.
Second.
So I'll withdraw or I'll amend it. I'll just take it as a friendly.
The one thing, you could do that, or you could withdraw it, make a motion to approve 962, then they can make a motion to amend over.
What's your pleasure?
I like that.
Okay, we'll do this.
So
on short time, we'll do what the clerk wants.
So on the floor right now is a motion to approve at 9.62. A motion to amend was just made,
Yes, at 9.58.
seconded by.
Mr. Second.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to amend 9.62 to 9.58.
That's correct.
Discussion? All right.
Roll call.
Director Manning, you raised your hand.
If I could, not that I expect to sway you either way, but just some additional points I'd like to make on using free cash. Of course, you've all seen the transfers we've been submitting and the collective bargaining agreements we've been submitting. Frankly, balancing a budget within the confines of Proposition 2.5 right now is very challenging. I think I would expect to build an FY26 budget that goes up to the full levy limit that's allowed under Proposition 2.5. Health insurance costs going up at least 10 to 15% each year. Our collective bargaining agreements, the trend is around 4% for the past 3 years. Pension assessments going up 5% automatically each year. The cost of goods and services across the board have gone up tremendously. So to try and balance a budget within what works out to 2.5% plus new growth, maybe 3 to 3.5% in any given year, it is going to be tough for the city. So to leave available revenue on the table that can help make progress towards not only the capital needs that we have, but also the ongoing operational needs that we know are going to keep coming up. I would just, a word of caution. Another unintended consequence of using free cash is that it creates excess levy capacity, which we're all familiar with. But essentially what that does is it creates, picture you have a big hole in the sand, which is your 2.5% increase each year. Essentially within that big hole, you're digging an even deeper hole. So to get to next year's budget, you not only need to fill that big hole, you also need to fill that little hole that you left from last year. So had the city gone up to its full levy limit last year, instead of seeing a 5.3% increase for the average single-family home, it would have been 4.3%.
So it's just to get across the point that it's not really a long-term fix to tax relief in the city, as many have alluded to. In some ways, it can be counterproductive in passing the increase on to future tax years. Thank you.
Councilor McCauley?
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate the comments by the finance director, especially around the analogy with the big hole. But we had a very similar discussion when we were trying to build a culvert down on Market Landing Park, which, by the way, is a big hole. And what happened was that instead of saving our money, instead of maybe shifting CPA money from one to the other to be smart about it, we rammed through $650,000 of free cash spend to build that. So we can't say it's difficult to balance a budget when we spend free cash on projects that we like and not give it back to the residents along the way. So I'll leave with that. Thank you.
Councilor Khan?
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate the finance director's comments. I think, this is it's complicated. Having been on budget and finance for as many years as I have, it's still very complicated when you think about how we factor up against Prop 2.5. And when you think about when Prop 2.5 passed, which was back in the 80s, it was really to set a limit on the amount that municipalities could tax the residents. Back in the 80s, and I think that goes back to the statement of why would you not go to that level? Because we have, and you see year after year, the impact. And I think that's exactly what Director Manning was saying, is if you don't, you do then see over time how that's going to end up being something you're really kind of chasing. And I get that, and I hear that. It's very logical, and it makes sense. But I also think we need to couple that, and the reason I'm still going to support this is because I do think we're at a point where there is a lot of policy conversations. I think we're making some progress on the other CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan, is that we're now trying to maybe hear a little bit more on the policy decisions, what might be some of those factors that we want to consider, and the good practice of the percentages we want to be towards, like how much on capital versus how much do we want to keep in terms of having some form of free cash at the end of the year to work with, and really that priority setting, which I think we're getting there. So for this year, I will support the free cash transfer, but I hope next year that we can strive to have a little bit more understanding, and as everything we're going to be talking about when it comes to the budget, when it comes to the CIP, is really to keep talking to the administration about those priorities, about that kind of rule of thumb, about where we can be part of that conversation, so that we're not here where we're feeling like we're going against maybe not having a transfer based on the committee meeting. I don't want it to be like that. It would be nice if we all kind of came together on why we're doing this, and so I'll end on that. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion?
On the amendment.
On the amendment. Councilor Wright?
No.
So the motion on the floor is to amend from 9.62 to 9.58.
Yes.
Roll call.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, roll call.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
11-0.
Councilor
Motion
Zede?
passes.
So now on the underlying motion, I just want to complete the circle on my sort of my argument to my counselors, to my colleagues tonight, and further consideration is this night that happens in 2025 starts right now. And so the budget that ends up getting put together and presented to us and then ultimately passed or not passed or amended or not amended, as I kind of hope to explain, numerically will govern the answer to this question. And so one thing I said in committee that I want to say publicly here on the floor is to me, a logical place to start would be what sort of tax increase would be reasonable. I personally don't think Prop 2.5 is broken. I can only imagine what the increases would be if we had Prop 3.5 or 4.5. I mean, 2.5 is yielding a 5.3% increase on average. I'm going to spare everybody the lesson on how that can happen with new growth and things that exceed what can basically go outside of the 2.5 bubble. Obviously, they're very real because many of the recent years exceed 2.5, and some by a decent margin, double or more in some cases. So to the finance director's point, I can only speak for myself. I do want spending to go down. I would love for it to come from efficiencies. That's a little bit out of our reach in the council. That's more of an operational question. We do touch upon it with every transfer we do. We do nip around it. If we do reorganizations, we try and address those questions as we go, the general structural thing. But to me, to answer my own question, something around 3% would be a nice target to shoot for. So I'm not saying that because I make the rules or that anybody's going to listen to me, but at least I'll have put a breadcrumb down to say 3% is what I think would be something to shoot for. And I do believe that that would mandate or require starting a budget at around 2%. Obviously, that is a more complex question than we can answer tonight. I'm simply offering some targets to think about. And again, in order to get to there in a year, to bring this increase to 3%, the use of free cash wouldn't pass this body and would be abhorrent. It'd be too much. It would be killing what we could spend on capital in a way that wouldn't be acceptable. So it has to start at the root. And as councilors know, we get the budget and then we hash it out. We can certainly get there through cuts. That's a whole conversation by itself. So 3% is my hope for next year. I think that requires building to a 2% levy increase, not a 2.5. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. So we still have the underlying
motion
on the table.
As amended.
As amended. Further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Roll call on the underlying motion for Order 631.
I'm just going to raise a point of order. So again, because I'm the chair, I want to make sure this is clean. So we can set the tax rate at 9.58. You have to do something. You have to bring a transfer in, I think, is the only way I'm seeing this. So I would anticipate that coming out on December. And I would suggest that it come in with an emergency because we probably shouldn't send tax bills out unless this thing is correct and packaged up fairly. If it's not adjudicated until January, because we won't have another committee meeting until January, would feel odd to me, and this is probably law that is over my head at this point that I haven't studied well. So do you concur, if I may, through the president?
Yes, I'd also add, if the council is willing to accept a late file at this point, we would be prepared to submit a transfer this evening. If you'd like to wrap up the process, I would defer to you on that.
Can we attach that as an amendment to this order, a transfer? I mean, a transfer is an order. You say, and transferring 300.
It would be two separate orders. You could combine the order, maybe, and have a motion to approve the tax rate at 9.58 for both, and a transfer, whatever number.
Right, that's what I mean, like append it to it.
We need to take a recess and maybe do it right.
I think if we could draw up the piece of paper that says that, we could amend it and attach it to this.
Can you do a transfer without the mayor's signature?
Yes, it no longer requires his signature. I did receive his authorization for it.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Oh, you're holding it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So motion. Sorry, as you can see, we've talked.
He was withholding it, now he's holding it.
Motion to amend to attach this.
Elves running around doing this?
Read that.
Well,
Okay.
so it's a transfer order, essentially.
Transfer request form, $330,000, $330,087, and from free cash to general fund budget reserve. And
I motion to append or attach that.
Yeah. Do you want to sign it?
When it passes, I'll be happy to sign it. If it passes.
Okay. Usually come in, they're signed when they come in. I just want to be careful. Right? Am I right?
Correct. The transfer form is no longer physically signed.
Okay.
I wouldn't sign it
So,
anyways, yeah.
so we're really talking about one mega motion on the floor, if you will, a motion to approve the tax rate both for residential and open space at 962, excuse me,
9.58.
9.58, excuse me, twice, meaning also for commercial, industrial, and personal property, and additionally approving transfer 206.
Oh, it has a number.
It does. It was ready.
Point of order, would we need a emergency preamble, a motion to waive the, just for the transfer?
Well, just to back up, so my suggestion is, it shouldn't have its own number. We should just attach it to the existing order as an amendment. Because if it has a 206, we would need to accept it as a late file, waive the rules to do that, then do an emergency. I think it's cleaner to just attach it as an amendment to the existing order, which is number 637,
631.
631.
What's the...
Strike you, Ethan? I mean,
My only concern is that then you'd be potentially missing the recommendation of the mayor, which is what the transfer form attempts to achieve. But I think either approach seems permissible.
yeah, I think it's cleaner to keep it
Separate.
with its number coming in from the mayor. We do have to waive the rules, declare an emergency. But we can do that, as far as I know. And when
All
you
right.
do that for just the transfer, or you do it for both, it's
So-
academic.
Maybe first thing would be motion to lay 631 on the table,
Second.
and then we'll adjudicate this new one, and then we'll
Table.
pick it back up off the table, because it's on the floor.
Well, you have to waive the rule, it's coming in as a late file.
Right, just for now, just motion to table 631. Right? Put it on the table.
Just
can do that.
just to put it aside for the moment,
So we can-
except
Another
the
debate while one is
transfer,
already-
yeah.
Okay.
As long as you don't approve a different tax rate.
Right.
No, remember, 9.58.
We're going up to 6.4.
Making a motion table?
Motion to table
We're not good at transposing numbers right now.
Okay. Roll call on that, Mr. President?
Yes.
Hold on, point of order.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Can we please go through what we're doing here? Just following along at home, this is like watching scrambled TV. So if we can just, in real simple fashion, say what we're laying out here and voting on.
Want to try?
My intent, Counselor, is to motion to table this, put this on the table, adjudicate transfer 206, which is now necessary in order to set the tax rate at the right rate. Once that has been adjudicated, I will make a motion to untable or take off the table 631. It's already been amended to 958, and then I think a simple motion to approve will be on the floor at that time.
Approve both.
Approve both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we need a motion to table.
So moved, 631.
Second.
Okay, roll call on the table.
Counselor Harmon?
Yes.
Counselor Khan?
Yes.
Counselor Lane?
Yes.
Counselor McCauley?
Yes.
Counselor Preston?
Yes.
Counselor Shan?
Yes.
Counselor Wright? Counselor Zede? Counselor Donahue?
Yes.
Counselor Granis? And Counselor Cameron?
Yes.
All right, motion to waive the rules and accept transfer 206 as a late file, and to establish an emergency, the emergency being the necessity to set the tax rate in a timely fashion to allow for tax bills to be sent, and to approve 206.
Second.
Let's do that as one thing. Waive the rules,
Do you want to approve
emergency.
it now, or do you want to wait and combine it?
Let's combine 31 and
I
20.
think that's
Okay.
cleaner.
Okay.
So this vote really is to waive the rules and declare an emergency on
Okay.
transfer 206. Anything else we need to do that?
And then we'll combine it with 631.
Yes, that's the plan.
Collectively.
So, and that would be seconded by? Again, waiving the rules to allow the transfer to come in at this point, and to declare an emergency with respect to emergency preamble under our charter for transfer 206. Roll call, Mr. President.
Yes, please.
Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston.
Yes.
Counselor Shan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
Counselor Granis.
Yes.
Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
All right, now, motion to take off the table, order 631.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
So we're moving from the table 631. Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston.
Yes.
Counselor Shan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
Counselor Granis. Counselor Cameron.
Now, a motion to approve collectively Order 631 as amended to 9.58 for both classes, as well as the accompanying Transfer 206, which effectively changes the mayor's recommendation.
Second.
Okay.
I think that's as clean as we can get it right now. Okay. Roll call.
Any further, okay, roll call.
Am I pushing that? Counselor Harmon.
Yes.
Counselor Khan.
Yes.
Counselor Lane.
Yes.
Counselor McCauley.
Yes.
Counselor Preston.
Yes.
Counselor Shan.
Yes.
Counselor Wright.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Donahue.
Yes.
Counselor Granis. Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
Well done.
Okay, that is it for Budget and Finance for business tonight. Thank you to everybody for their efforts on this and helping us get it together. Maybe say more good of the order. So I just want to note that we will be meeting off-cycle, but our regularly standing meeting will be on this coming Monday, because Thursday, of course, is the holiday. Almost every item we're taking up is Committee of the Whole. The 3 salary items will be coming on Monday if you're interested in those. The AFSCME contract, which came in tonight, is also docketed. And then the gift from the Moral Foundation. So if you're interested in any of those, either come, send comment, questions. That is our last committee meeting for this calendar year, and then we will endeavor to bring out as much of those things as we can, and we will start as fresh as we can in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Zede. So that would bring us to Community Services.
Yes, thank you. We continue to have a clear docket, and so we will be canceling our meeting on Monday.
Boo.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
That would lead us to General Government, and I think the clerk has paper copies of redlined Order 637, which I believe he has handed out to you all. So I'll provide some information, then I'll let the debate happen around me, so I don't have to cede the podium here. Motion to approve Order 637, order authorizing hiring process for the city clerk officer, city clerk position as amended in committee.
Second.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'll just quickly run through this, and many of you were in general government earlier. And I apologize for this not being in the committee items in general government, but the clean version was in there. This just gives you some of the background. As I said, in committee, which was also a committee of the whole, we took this up based on the clerk's intention to retire as of January 10th. He may be reconsidering it after the excitement of tonight, because that was really well played. And so in order to post this position on a timely basis, we had a draft that we worked on, and then in committee, we took a look at this amended version, and Councilor Zede did a tremendous job on the order. Much of which you'll see is coming from how to walk us through from the screening committee. Again, it's a screening committee now, not a hiring committee, because the hiring committee really is all 11 of us as counselors, but there would be a 3 voting member, 3 counselors, myself, Councilor Zede, and Councilor Shand would be the voting members. We'd have 2 additional non-voting members, City Clerk Rich Jones and former Clerk and Mayor John Moak. They would be non-voting members that are going to help out in a couple of ways. We would operate as a public body, and we've inserted language at Councilor Zede's suggestion about how to do this in a way that is not going to, for initial candidates that are reviewed, they will not have to be publicly named. And there's some language about that. Those names would be disclosed once we get to the final stage and there's a public interview process. So Human Resources would post a job description, which we'll talk about momentarily. All resumes would be sent to the screening committee. We'll communicate those to the full council so they can at least see the resumes. The screening committee with the 2 non-voting members will select folks for an initial round of interviews. And then we'll do those initial interviews. The screening committee itself will do those. We'll try to bring no fewer than 2 candidates to the full council. We'll inform you of those selections. If there's somebody, at any point in this, if there's somebody that you feel should be interviewed at the next level, you can make that known to the screening ad hoc, and then get it to a place where it's going to be up to the 11 counselors to choose the next person. So that's the order itself. The job description. Fewer amendments, but there were some. I think I captured all the red lines in there, but I feel like there might have. I definitely have the updated version, but there are a couple of things. The residency requirement. We had talked initially thinking that the city clerk needed to be a resident in order to be serving on the Board of Registrars. We found between Rich Jones' research and the city solicitor that the clerk in a municipality can serve on the Board of Registrars without being a resident of that particular community. They do serve ex officio, so the clerk does not have to be a resident. We did discuss in committee the merits of having a residency preference, not a requirement, but a preference, and we did vote, and it's on one of the last pages, we did vote to delete a line about a residency preference. So that was changed, and that is reflected in the red line that you see. And there also was discussion about potential changes to the parking operations of the city. Right now, those are a part of the clerk's office. There's interest in at least having a discussion, with the mayor, and it would require a much deeper dive, similar to the Parks Department change that happened last year or so. For now, parking is still within the clerk's office, but there's some language in there indicating it might potentially change, just so somebody isn't walking into a job thinking that in perpetuity they're going to also oversee parking. They may, but they may not, and there's some language at the very end, in particular, next to the salary range, that the management of the parking system would be an additional stipend. But again, it's serving as just to inform the person that may not be the case. So that's it for informational. I don't know if I'll cease from deliberation, but if anybody else wants to comment, Councilor Zeid.
Yeah, thank you. I hope councilors will consider supporting the order. And I just wanted, I think the chair and the president has already provided a good summary of some of the changes that were made to just try and add more belts and suspenders, more parameters around the process, more notification to councilors and power to councilors to make sure candidates they think are worthy of interviewing can be interviewed. I just wanted to fly a little bit higher and just really address the main constituency here, which is the public, and just why we're trying to put this together. First of all, I ended up, maybe by accident, doing a tremendous amount of reading about this, and hiring in the public sector is really hard because you've got to balance the need to do everything in a transparent public manner against, obviously, you have real people who are applying for jobs, and those real people may have circumstances that make it difficult. Maybe they have an existing job and they don't want to necessarily show that they're maybe looking for another job or showing an interest in that. And the law, I think, does contemplate this to a degree. And so you have, public records law. We've had recent experiences with hires, and some of those were governed by charter. We don't have quite the same process defined for this specifically in the charter as we do with, say, hiring a new police marshal or a new fire chief, which require a committee be formed, and even the membership of that is reasonably prescribed. So I think what we've tried to do here is basically create a process that we could look back on and say, hopefully we adhere to this process. So the council president sort of went through it, but forming a screening committee, allowing for the efficient processing of applicants so that, the full council doesn't have to try and schedule a dozen special council meetings to try and address this. Second thing is to address, I think in a fair way, the privacy of the applicants, at least in the initial rounds, and then versus the public's right to know. And that's essentially what they talk about in the Guide to Massachusetts Public Records Law, and they provide a specific exemption around that. And so the public interest here really is that we can get good candidates. And I think if we say, if you just submit your resume, we're going to say your name, that could preclude certain people. Now, that being said, if they are selected to go to a final interview, that'll happen in this room in open session, and there's simply no way around that. And that apparently is quite customary. I've never done this type of thing specifically for a city clerk's position, but it's an immensely public position, obviously, and so that will need to be addressed. So I think, I'm hoping, and then the second thing for the public to know is just that we did try and put a timeline on it. It's impossible to say when we can do this, but we endeavor for 3 months, and as we talked about in committee, we're not in full control whether we get a dozen applications in the first hour or we get 2 applications in the span of 2 months. We just don't know that yet. As the council president found in research, there's 2 other communities, I think, that are looking for clerks right now. So we just have really no idea what we're getting into in that, but we needed to have some flexibility to do it and really commit to trying at least getting 2, so at least there's a choice. But hopefully there could be a broader option, a broader selection. And I think in the job description, we again endeavored with amendments to open it up and just see what we get and figure it out. So I do think it's worthy, but I'm hoping that everybody who's interested in how this process will go could just review this, and this is hopefully how we intend to do it, and we will do it. So I look forward to supporting it. I'm sad to lose the clerk, but we will keep moving. Thank you.
Councilor Wright?
Just quickly, this process is very similar and has been followed in superintendent searches on the school committee side, which I'm very familiar with. So this does address how those searches have been conducted and the final results in the final interview. So I'm very comfortable with the way that this is presented, and I thank the committee for getting us to this point.
Further discussion? Councilor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. And I really do want to thank the councilor from Ward 1 really for, and the council president for putting this together and refining the screening process, because my first reaction was initially, it's a pretty big role. All 11 of us, work with the city clerk, and why are we not all involved in this effort when it was defined as only 3? But I really do appreciate some of the points for the screening committee to really also involve the full council. And so like points number 5, where, we will get all resumes confidentially. So it's not like we're just going to see the ones that are in the short list that made it, but we get to see all the resumes. Again, I emphasize the confidentiality, which I totally think is an important aspect to maintain, especially in that first, when you get all the resumes initially. I also think it's when interviews are selected by the screening committee, if any of us here feel like we want to interview a candidate that wasn't selected, then we could go into executive session and ask that. So I really appreciate including all of us without making it a cumbersome process by, having more people on the screening committee. So I will be supporting this, and I thank all the effort that went in to really craft something that's a good model for us and maybe other municipalities might want to look at. Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call.
Roll call on approving Order 637 as amended. Councilor Harmon?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Granis?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes. Thank you. Nothing further to report from general government, licenses and permits.
We don't have anything to bring to the committee today. We do have an order that is in there, and we've just been assigned another order, so we'll have our regular meeting. We'll have to, yes, Wednesday, possibly, is our scheduled meeting date. That's the day before Thanksgiving. If that needs to be adjusted, I'll reach out to my committee members to get their input on doing that.
Thank you. Leads us to planning and development.
Thank you, Council President. Motion to approve appointment 519.
Second.
This is appointment 519, John Leclerc, as he told us, Jack Leclerc, to the planning board as associate member. He answered the mayor's call to volunteer. He is an attorney, also a self-reported dabbler in real estate, and also a lieutenant colonel from the Air Force. So we didn't have too many questions for him. He is interested in joining the planning board and is actually excited. He's been reading some of the planning board minutes, so the committee voted 3-0 to approve him.
Thank you. Any further discussion on appointment 519? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright. Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue. Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
I didn't get to put yes.
Thank you. Did someone-
You're too fast.
All right. Motion to approve appointment 522, James Kirkham,
Second.
to the Fruit Street Historic Commission. Also answering the mayor's call to volunteer. He was drawn to the Fruit Street Historic Commission as he's the owner of one of the oldest homes in Newburyport, dating back to the 1760s. He looks forward to being part of the Historic Commission as he's had more than a few old homes that he's restored himself. The committee voted 3-0 for his approval.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call on appointment 522.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion to receive and file communications 594 and 595.
Second.
These two communications were regarding the Brown School, one being the memo from the mayor and the other being a letter from residents. We took our time and had public comment for almost an hour and a half from all the residents and had some discussion amongst ourselves about going forward with the Brown School. But as Councilor Wright rightly stated last time in City Council chambers, that we don't have anything to truly vote on. We vote on the disposition of the land and we vote on zoning, and that is not in front of us. Now, granted, we do have more stuff in front of us for our next meeting, more public comment, no doubt, but for these two items, we decided to receive and file them. We
Thank
voted
you.
3-0 to do such.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll just mention one thing, and it relates to this, so I'm not inserting a new agenda topic here, but related to the Brown School, at least several councilors had asked about possibility of wanting to do an appraisal of the Brown School, and I did talk to the mayor about it. He's open to talking about it, so it'd be some discussion between, I'm happy to have, if anyone wants to join with me, with him and the planning director, trying to outline what it is we're looking for, how much it would cost. That's all. So just, that's information, not for a discussion, I suppose, but just so you know that that's a possibility. All right, so motion was collectively receive and file 594 and communication 595. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
A few more items.
Okay.
Not only have we been having our regular meetings, we did have another joint meeting with the planning board last week. Went very well. It was the ADU ordinance where we have now officially closed the public hearing. I expect we'll probably have one more meeting of our committee, and we'll probably bring that out to the full council for a vote at our next meeting in December. And now that we have a few more Brown School items, we'll figure out when those will be appropriate. I think our ADU meeting will probably be a little bit long. But our next meeting is next Tuesday as regular scheduled at 6:30. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Shand. Public Works and Safety.
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to make a motion to approve Order 635 and to receive and file Communication 582.
Second.
Okay.
So 635 is the snow and ice plan. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. This is where DPS rolls out to us and to the public what they're going to do and how they're going to approach managing snow going forward. As part of the presentation, they list out how snow emergency parking bans work, how it's notified, how the public is notified, the locations of the blue lights, and all of that going forward. It does list out alternative delegated parking areas for those people affected, Green Street, Cushing Park, Waterfronts East and West, Hales Court, C&J Park and Ride, and the State Street lot on the corner of Harris Street. And those spots are free to the public, and after 12 hours after the snow emergency ends, then regular rules will follow. So if it's a 3-hour lot, when the snow emergency is ended, after 3 hours, you need to move your car, et cetera, along the way. So it's 12 hours after the snow emergency is over that the rules of the lot take over. What is missing here, and I'm sure we'll get questions on, is the garage. The garage is not a designated free spot. If people go into the garage, and they're welcome to if there's spots, it is a pay-for. They would need to log in and pay, et cetera, along the way going forward. Next up would be how DPS approaches snow plowing itself in the 3 steps, pre-treatment, plowing, as well as post-storm cleanup. There's always a safety reminders here on sidewalks, driveways, mailbox and fences, notifications, et cetera. For those who may be new to the city, they should go on the city's website and sign up and be notified, because they're very prompt and good about letting you know a snow emergency, when it's over, et cetera, along the way. It's probably the better way to do that. In terms of Communication 582, it was brought forward by a councilor from Ward 3, who was approached by our residents who were trying to adjust the parking from all on the street to half of the street instead of removing it. We had a brief debate about that, but really what happens is it extends the period of time that DPS is out there working, creates some confusion. You get lateral streets come on and park cars there. So it never really works out. It's a little bit better to get everyone off. They can have a cleaner clean up and end the snow emergency a little faster. So that's how that debated. Thank you. It came out 3-0.
Okay. So the motion was made and seconded to approve Order 635 and receive and file Communication 582. Thank you for the explanation, Councilor. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to approve Order 634.
Second.
This is, first of all, I'm going to give the committee report and tell you how we voted, let people comment, maybe the sponsor comment as well, and then I'll offer my opinion as well as in turn with everyone else. So in the committee, we reviewed the resolution versus what happened, the Water and Sewer Committee on 11/30. After some discussion, it was generally agreed upon that the Water and Sewer Commission may have been given some inaccurate assumptions to go on. There was talk of who is the assessing board or decision maker. Our current city solicitor opined that the Water and Sewer Board was the decision maker, but 2 previous KP Law opinions said it was the City Council. We talked about the acts of 1962 and 1963 and how the board was established. And the real answer to that is, like all city boards that established in the city, they were established with most, but not all of that authority, and that authority came from rate setting. Was the number equitable? The answer was no. The 3 Water and Sewer Commissioners who were present felt that they had the authority to end the fee, and thus it was okay, and they explained their logic. The rest of us said only the council can end the fee. We created by order the fee. There was no end date. There was no criteria for it, so only we can end that criteria. This was confirmed not by my opinion, but by KP Law, 2 opinions that in defense of the privilege fee cited the council order from 2005 that actually instructed the Board of Sewers to impose equitably this fee. The water and sewer members maintained that they felt pressure to decide at the meeting and would have preferred to have a second bite at this. The public comment, although brief, basically surrounded the fact that they thought the calculation was unfair. We in the committee voted 3-0 to bring forward this, but we voted 2-1 to recommend approval because we think this is a council matter and the council should have discussion about it.
Okay. Further discussion, Councilor Preston?
Yeah, thank you. So I just, and I apologize to those of you who were in the committee meeting, but not everyone was there, so I do have some comments on this that might be a little bit repetitive. But just as a little bit of a history on this, there was a 2005 order from the City Council, which was the direction of how to pay for a 2006 project for an improvement of the water and sewer lines in the low street sewer tributary area. And there was a 20-year bond for the project, which would be paid for 50% by betterment fees to all of those residents living in that area at the time, as well as 50% was to be paid for by privilege fees, which would be any additional new growth in the area, new building, as well as if anyone put an extra bedroom, an extra bathroom, those sorts of things in their home. I want to be really clear that the resolution is not fighting the mayor. I've reached out to him and let him know that. It is also not fighting the project at Port Plaza. I very much want to see that happen. And I am not fighting the Water Sewer Commission. I've reached out to them, and they, given the set of facts that they were given, they made a compromise that they really felt was reasonable at the time, and they did the best with the facts that they were given. However, the resolution for me is really fighting the inequity of charging residents in excess of $2 million over 18 years, and then giving a developer a $1.5 million waiver and asking residents to continue to pay this fee. And to be very clear, there's been some misperception here that this privilege fee would end after 20 years, and that is indeed not correct. The order that creates this privilege fee does not in any way state that the privilege fee would end. The misperception was based around the fact that the bond was a 20-year bond, and that once the bond was paid off, that the privilege fee would end. But of course, not only are we not guaranteed to have captured all of the costs over those 20 years that we've paid our bond, so we're paying the mortgage on this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we collected all the rent to cover all those costs. And you certainly could make the argument that with $76 million worth of water and sewer infrastructure in our CIP, that we certainly need money in our water and sewer enterprise funds. It's also important to understand that over the 18 years since this project was put into play, no one has any knowledge of the Water Sewer and Commission waiving or abating any of the fees to anyone in the low street sewer tributary area. So the resolution is asking the Water Sewer Commission to rescind their recent vote to reduce the privilege fee to the developer from $1.5 million down to $452. That $452 number, to be clear, is the amount of money that has not been captured, I guess, by the betterment and privilege fees from the original $3 million project. The recent opinion that we also got from our city solicitor, as the counselor the committee chair has said, it not only goes directly in face of the previous two opinions from KP Law, it does not, in my opinion, address the hallmark of the resolution, which is this waiver from the Water Sewer Commission reasonable and equitable as is necessary by the order. Again, I want to be very clear that the Water Sewer Commission was told that the full weight of the deal for the Port Plaza project was on the shoulders, and that the developer may walk away if they did not agree to waive it. And they did their best work with the facts that were given to them and doing what they thought was a reasonable compromise at the time. I will note that the Water Sewer Commission, in the meeting where they made that the waiver of the fee, well, the abatement of the fee. They did discuss how this could really look inequitable, going directly to the point that it may not be an equitable decision. They talked about the need to have a PR strategy to overcome potential backlash from residents. And in fact, at their recent November 20th meeting, they voted to meet with the mayor and the director of finance to discuss this in further detail because they feel that they're on shaky ground. And then I will say, you know, and this is more my commentary, but we have $76 million worth of water and sewer infrastructure in our CIP. To me, the last place that we should be giving out waivers and abatements to a developer of a project is through the water and sewer fees. We also voted last year to raise sewer rates 9% and water rates 3%. Because we desperately need money in these funds to pay for the infrastructure that we need. There was certainly discussion at last year's water sewer rate, when we set those water sewer rates, that we would anticipate continuing to increase those water sewer rates in this year and years beyond this. And, you know, I think it's really hard to look taxpayers in the eye and say, we are going to continue to raise water sewer rates when we've just given a developer a really significant abatement to a water sewer fee. And then lastly, I do want to say that when we discussed this in committee, I was very open that I would be open to an amendment to rescind this vote and go back to the Water Sewer Commission, looking for them to look at the formula, because I do think it's fair that there should be a different formula for multi-dwelling units, especially something as large as Port Plaza, which is very different than residential. The amendment was not made in committee. I'm certainly open to that discussion here on the floor tonight, but I do think it's really important that we rescind this particular vote, well, that we ask that the Water Sewer Commission rescind this particular vote, figure out a formula that does work, and then implement that new formula into the multi-unit dwelling, because then it would be fair to not only the developer at Port Plaza, it would be fair to the residents that will continue to have to pay this fee. And so that, to me, would be a much more elegant solution to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilor McCauley?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. I do believe that in reviewing this, the two assumptions that were there were that the authority had to make, the Water and Sewer Commission had the authority to make this decision, and they had the power to end the privilege fee. I think those two things are very important. As I had mentioned previously, our opinion by MHTL reasoned that because the sewer board was established by the Acts of 1962, Section 7 conferred the authority as the decision maker to do that. However, our city section, our Code of Ordinances, Section 2.368, water and sewer can propose rates subject to approval by the city council, and then we doubled down on that in Ordinance 1432 that states the board can propose rates and fees subject to the rules and approvals set forward by the city council. So this ordinance is consistent with every other city department we have. It does contradict the opinion from our current solicitor. So the council is the decision maker on fees, rates, etc. So at best, the process should have been that the commission proposed an alternative calculation for the privilege fee going forward. The second assumption that they could end the fee is just wrong. As I had mentioned, we had established it in 2005. Only the legislature can end it. There isn't a board that, an unelected board, an appointed board that can overrule the legislature. We've seen history of that being overruled along the way. A real stretch on that is the Chevron decision in the U.S. Supreme Court, where the EPA had overstepped their bounds because they weren't elected and they weren't representing what the legislature had going forward with it. So, so for the 19 years, as was mentioned, the uniform unit method was used. And for this project, it was evident that commissioners argued that The uniform unit method was onerous for a dense project like this in multifamily housing. It should be adjusted for this project. It should have come back and said the density for multifamily housing was calculated out, and the number approved was simply assuming the remaining balance of the privilege fee. Okay, why is that important? It's important, one, because it needs to be equitable, and two, the decision opened another Pandora's box of more questions. The fee is still in effect. So what happens when developer 2 comes along with a 100-unit proposal? Do we pick another fee out of the air? Or developer 3 that comes with a 50-unit proposal? Remember, this is an area that we're trying to overlay zoning for to encourage growth of all kinds. So how would the privilege fee be calculated? So I do support the resolution. I do support the ask to rescind it, and I will share with you, I will make this amendment after people have spoken, but that we talked about it in committee, and we talked about that the Water and Sewer Commission rescind their 1130 decision, and to make an adjustment to the formula for the privilege fee that would be equitable for multifamily housing development, and to submit that to the council for approval. And I think that would give us the hand-in-glove type of support we need in this matter to be able to respect our precedent and our authority, and be able to still support some type of development going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Further comment or discussion? Councillor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. Definitely appreciate the conversation and, having attended the committee and trying to follow exactly, what was the intent of the betterment and privilege fee. This definitely has been an excellent learning experience, a lot more than any of us knew about this betterment and privilege fee, and I think we've learned a lot through this process. The one thing, and where I've come to a place where I feel like that maybe we can try to work with several of the elements that really led to this action is that we do bring it back to this body here in terms of whether or not this fee should be continuing. And so that is a component that another order could essentially be introduced. And I did talk with the administration, with the Director Manning, to see what would that look like, and possibly bring that at our next committee meeting so that we could stop it. And so here's where I'm going to kind of come from in terms of a couple of things I mentioned in the committee as well. I do think that our boards and commissioners, we appoint them here. We meet with them when it's time for reappointment, or we see who's the next person. And I really respect the job they do, and I know no one's here not respecting it, but I also think when it comes to making them take back a decision they made, we really need to be careful and thoughtful that when do we want to exercise that power, if we even feel like we are in the role to exercise it. And I'm not saying we're not. We definitely can do that. But in my looking at the situation, having attended that meeting, I thought the conversation was a thoughtful one. Yes, it was a special meeting at a horrible time for me, but we all try to make it. But I never attended their meetings. I may have attended one early on when they were doing the water and sewer rate selection and what they were setting it to like 2 or 3 years ago. But their day-to-day business is something that I have a lot of respect for what they do and how they make their decisions and who's there to kind of advise them. And so for me personally, having listened to it and seeing that their decision was really to see what was left on what the amount was on the order that established it, and say, well, we'll have them pay this. And actually some of the commissioners thought that meant that ended the privilege fee. And when they heard it didn't, then it became clear to me that that's something we should stop. If this is being paid off, then we should stop that. Now, if we feel like, okay, there's a lot of development that might also be happening in addition, then we could revisit and we could put something like that again in place. We do have additional developments happening. Waterfront West is one of them. But I feel like for me, the clean way to do this is, not ask them to rescind, but see what we could do now to stop the collection, and that to me is something we can control. I also think that given what they have said in the time period to pay off the bond, which was 2.9 and some change million, it really was kind of a trickle payment. It took some time because of the residential. This development is pretty much a big opportunity to just get it off the books. So in terms of those who have paid into it already, that's part of the nature of these types of fees, is that they are collected till you reach the amount that will pay it off. If this development wasn't there, we don't know how many more years it would have taken to pay off the remainder amount. So for me, I won't be supporting this resolution, but instead I will be bringing in an order to stop the privilege fee from being collected. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Zieg.
Thank you. First thing is just to take a minute to fly a little high, fly a little higher, like 30,000 feet. I think this resolution is worth supporting, if for no other reason that my learning curve has been that the council has got to defend itself and defend its powers and its prowess. You have to believe in this body. If you spend as much time as we do in here, you have to believe in it. And I just can't wrap my head around, I don't need a long legal opinion to give me a logical argument for how a body can create a fee and then have no control over that fee. There's not a resident you could walk by on State Street and explain that logically to them and say, yeah, well, we created the fee, but that's about it. They can choose to levy it or not levy it, or in fact, they can charge one person one amount, another person another amount. Imagine if you walk around and the parking tickets are different rates, or depending on what you punch in on the thing for your license plate, you get a different rate to park in the Green Street lot. This does not make any sense. And there's precedent for this. The setting of the actual water sewer rates was the subject of much debate 5 or 6 years ago. It was kind of a bloody fight, and at the end of the day, it became clear that the council sets the rates. We set the fees. That's what we do. We just did a transfer tonight for a few $1,000s. If they want to move money from sewer retained earnings to another fee, another account, that has to come to the council. So just try and logic through that they can't move a penny in a transfer without the city council, but they could waive $1 million fee. This is not logical. And more importantly, it's not fair to the commissioners. I think something that has also been oft debated is what's the role of an appointed body. And, again, my learning curve has been that the tough calls, the tough decisions have to come back to the city council. Why? I would say we get paid the big bucks. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but it's because we're best equipped to basically, if there was going to be the weight of a deal falling apart, it should have fallen on the city council. And in fact, this whole thing, this whole exercise on this project has been really challenging, right? Because we're on the outside trying to do PPOD, trying to do our thing with zoning, and we have a development agreement negotiated in good faith by the mayor. That's all fair, but procedurally, it's tough. And so you're trying to do the right thing from within the confines of what you do, and typically zoning would be our thing, and fees would be our thing, and the best we're doing is essentially asking for reconsideration. So that alone makes it worth, offering this your support. But secondarily, I just want to put in that, and I know my colleague at large will probably speak on this, but betterments are they're a tough thing. The equity is a big deal with betterments and privilege fees. Why? Because there are some projects we choose to undertake where we just whack all the ratepayers all at once, and we say you've all got to pay into this for 20 years. We're going to replace a force main somewhere, and it's going to be $3 million. We're just going to spread that out over everybody for 20 years. And then there's other things, cough, cough, Plum Island, where we say, no, that this is a special thing, and you have to pay as a homeowner, and other ratepayers are not going to share in that expense. And so equity is a real thing when you talk about a rate-based system, and then that's what the water sewer is. This isn't the general fund where it's always everybody pays in. And so that's kind of really hard to get your head around. And so I would just say that, I think this sends an important message, and it's frankly an ask. So at the end of the day, I'm not really sure what practically happens with this. If you read the development agreement, it's baked into there. It's like section whatever, number, Romanet, whatever. So, this is a woven web now, but I think even if it doesn't result in a rescission of this specific thing, we need to send a message that the council's looking, The council expects to be taken seriously on matters that we think matter. And with due respect to the city solicitor, I just think that was a bit of a drop ball. Clearly, it wasn't as obvious, considering you have 3 opinions, 2 out of 3 concur and 1 doesn't. So something is messed up there. But it also shows you that these are opinions. It's not a court. So we've got to do our job, and right now that's to defend our place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zede. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Councillor from Ward 1, for that segue into my conversations. As many of you know, I've always been outspoken about the inequity as to how the water and sewer rates, fees, accounts are managed in a way that discriminates against people who have paid a betterment on Plum Island to have water and sewer. But every time we turn around, there's money coming out of the hydrant fund, there's money coming out of this fund, and none of that money is coming out of the general coffers of the water and sewer rates that we all pay. So, I want to again state for the record that it's not fair. If you're going to waive a betterment or whatever fee you're calling it, privilege fee, betterment fee, why don't we waive the rest of the betterment fees for Plum Island that have yet to be paid? How's that not fair? So, I'll continue to beat this dead horse as long as I'm on the council. But I'm fully supportive of this resolution. The pragmatic part of me says, okay, yeah, so, you know, what happens? Probably nothing. But I agree with the council from Ward 1 that the council has designated or delegated some authority to these appointed boards. But ultimately, because we create that authority, we should be able to oversee it and make sure that everything's being done. The ratepayers, the taxpayers, they get to vote us in and out of office. And so we should be the final people that are accountable for these things.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shand and then Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Councillor President. I appreciate the logic from the at-large councillor at the end of the table. I think respecting our commissioners is important, and I do think, I appreciate the effort that went into writing this. I do. Resolutions are hard. But I will say, I think, to the point of the Ward 1 councillor, what we can do, and what the at-large councillor said she was going to do, is bring in something that we could actually work with, establish a new one. So I think that's where we can show that this is what the council can do. So not going to support this resolution, but I would support what the at-large councillor is planning on doing next. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Khan.
Yeah, just, and I don't mean to be dense here, but the Plum Island situation, just to kind of air that out a little bit, I just want to make sure I understand the apples to apples comparison. So if you guys don't mind me asking, and Ethan's not here, how much is left on that? And I believe this is being charged because of the water sewer extension. Is that what that's paying off? And do we happen to know what's left on that bond? I'm just asking if anyone knows. Sorry, what's left?
So so it was split up into a portion that was going to pay water, a portion that's going to pay sewer. I may have them mixed up, but I believe that one of the 2 betterments is going to expire in about a year, and then the balance will be still due for about another 10 years, if I'm correct.
And that balance, you don't know the number by any chance?
It was a $20 million project. So.
Got it. So I guess my my point is it's not quite apples to apples, but I hear the parallel in terms of where else in the city do we have this? Because for us, we have in our ordinances the municipal fee schedule, which I remember working on, and we want to be very transparent on what fees are being charged. And at the end of our ordinances in Appendix A, we've moved them all there so that every year we know what these fees are, we see them. And that to me is, looking here, those fees aren't here. So it makes me think this is a little different than the types of fees we're used to coming across. And I'm not at all, first of all, it's not very transparent. So it makes me wonder too on not just, I think the whole situation is bringing a lot to my mind that's like, okay, so what else is going on in the city about these types of fees? We don't know. But at the end of the day, I do really think that there's a good solution here. Again, I won't be supporting the resolution. And I actually do think the Water and Sewer Commissioners, and looking at the documents that they got that was posted later, so I think there's a lot to learn from the whole process. That did not go well. And I completely agree with that. Having been, again, attending via Zoom, and knowing what they had with them, there's a lot to learn. And I do definitely know why we have this resolution, because it wasn't ideal. And it put everyone in a very rushed situation. But at the end of the day, I think that the action they made is fair, and I think there's some next steps that we can do. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McCauley?
I appreciate the conversation and perspectives. But the other perspective that I'll share is that this isn't over. And what I mean by that is we're not sure that the development's even going to happen. It's a long road to get there. So until the fee is actually paid and billed, which won't happen till it's done, we can't end anything, right? If we want to time that. And so if the development at Port Plaza doesn't happen, then we have a betterment fee, we have a privilege fee forever, right, until we take it off. So trying to, end the privilege fee when we actually don't have all the payments for it, even though we have paper commitments to actually get there, opens up another circular discussion about what's potentially going to happen there. And so this can easily be resolved, and easily, in my opinion, be resolved by going back and having the Water Sewer Board do what we asked them to do, which is to come up with a formula for multifamily housing that they believe is equitable for a 200, 100, and 50-unit building that may, in the future, be developed there. That's what we asked them to do. And I'll, as a reminder, sometimes our boards make mistakes. Look no further than the Institution for Savings. A volunteer board made a decision, they got sued, they lost. We had to pick up the pieces over time. We got to a situation, and it still wasn't palatable for everyone. But we had to support them. But they had to, they had to go through the process of understanding that they did make a mistake in potential situation. So sometimes our boards make a mistake. This is an easy way to try to let them off the hook that say, listen, we think you got misleading information that wasn't quite what we'll say is accurate in terms of everyone's perspective. You think you did, and we think you should just reset it. They could calculate the same dollar amount and would probably be supportive of it. But again, it would have to look down the road that says in 6 months, when 2 single houses come on down at Low Street, they need to have an equitable formula. And when a 100-unit development happens next to Hodges, they need to be able to look everyone in the eye and say it's equitable. And when the state opens up something on at the C&J lot, we need to get a cut of that as well to pay for our sewer infrastructure. That's what we need to do. The ask of the sewer board is to look out for the best interests of the sewer users and the ratepayers. They're not being asked to close housing deals. That's what we do. And so that's why I think this is a way for them, this resolution is a way for them to be able to come back and have a second bite at that apple. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Donahue, and then Councilor Khan.
Thank you. So I was the dissenting vote of this coming out, but because I do feel that we should be respecting our commissioners and board members. However, I definitely do feel that the amount of money is just exorbitant. And the way it all went down was not, well, it wasn't okay, to say the very least. And I think that's the genesis of this conversation and what we're here deciding on. So I do agree with a lot of what has been said by my fellow counselors in that I'm at this point a bit convinced that it is necessary. I also do agree that we should be revisiting this entirely. So I appreciate the at-large counselors' efforts and would support that moving forward as well. But I definitely do think that a formula should be revisited by the Water Sewer Commission, and something more equitable should be recommended and proposed. Thank you.
May I make a motion to move the question?
Sure.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call?
Roll call on the motion to move the question, or, okay.
Yes.
Roll call.
Okay. Moving the question, Councilor Harmon.
No.
Councilor Khan.
No.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
No.
Councilor Shan.
No.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
No.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
And Council President Cameron.
Yes.
Yes. Needing a simple majority, I believe. The question is now on the floor for vote. Everybody agree? And we'd move right, Mr. President, right to
Yeah.
approving the order as written. 6:34. Roll call. Councilor Harmon?
No.
Councilor Khan?
No.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
No.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Granis?
Yes.
Councilor President Cameron?
No.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Motion to approve Order 612, authorizing a bike share program.
Second.
Okay. So in committee, we had a representative from Newburyport Livable Streets. They provided an overview. There are no real changes from the prior review from Community Services. It was hoped that the conversation would go deeper into the what, where, and how of the program, but they don't have those details. The ask of us is to approve the bike share as a concept. There are no firm details. The ask is for the council to establish a line item, or receipts reserve account, so as to accept the grant and donations. We're basically parking the grant on our balance sheet going forward. And once that happens, DPS will be able to issue an RFP, a vendor will be chosen, all the logistical details that we're trying to get our arms around will be agreed upon. The city will pay the bills submitted. The vendor is expected to charge us $2,200 a year per bike to run the program. But there are other questions, for example, the metrics that were submitted as a memo tonight. This is the first time we're seeing them, so we didn't get a chance to debate them. The question is, who's going to promote and run programming on this? Livable Streets said they're hands-off, they don't have the bandwidth. DPS, as we know, is not a programming organization, they're an execution organization. And the vendor, they're not sure. What incentive do they have? They're getting paid per bike, per year. They're not getting a % of revenues or anything like that. So what was frustrating about this, if this is our ask, is that there's no business plan. How will we achieve the goals and objectives and metrics in this? We need additional revenue. Where is the drive, for example, to open up the door to advertising, as an example, right? There's no operating plan. Are they going to use the bike path only for the pilot? No one under 16 is in their RFP. The impact to city streets, do we want to have 20 bikes riding around Market Square roadway on Yankee homecoming weekend with no rules and objectives? We just don't know. There's no financial plan. Grants don't do what everyone thinks grants do. This grant covers 80% of the capital expenditures of this. However, the deal they're putting the RFP out is for operational expense. They're going to pay a fixed fee for a bike per year. The only CapEx is pouring the pads. So the schedule that they've provided to us is inaccurate. The contracts, if it opens up at $2,200 a bike, 35 bikes should roughly be OpEx of $78,000. But we're not going to get $78,000. We're going to be reimbursed for 60% of that going forward. So the point I'm trying to make here is that if we want to move forward with the bike share program, then all this is a framework of a concept. It doesn't have the details that we need, and it's going to need additional funding to the tune of maybe $50,000 to $100,000 over the 3-year of the program. That's over and above what they've calculated here. We voted 2-1 to bring it forward. I was the one against, simply because I wanted to have this kind of discussion and say, what kind of program do we have? I think generally we all said that we're in favor of a bike share program and we'd like to see it move forward. But I think that what's missing here is the details, and the details really matter in this case. I'd say either, well, I'll just end it with that. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilor Harmon?
Thank you, President. I appreciate the Chair's summary and perspective on this latest iteration. I'm glad that I had the opportunity in community services several months ago to hear firsthand from the Newburyport Livable Streets representatives advocating for this program. I had a much different interpretation of the plan, the level of detail in their proposal, and the costs that may, come to the city in the range of $50,000, $60,000 if they're not able to close the gap. So I think, in general, Newburyport Livable Streets is made up of volunteers who happen to be, in my, anecdotal assessment, some of the most active, present, visible across a range of issues related to making Newburyport a really great place to live and ride a bike and walk and run. And so I think the concept that, they some fly-by-night organization is going to drop a bunch of bikes and have them broken laying around the rail trail is just, doesn't add up for me. What does add up is that they've put together a pilot program for a 3-year bike share that I think benefits people who travel to Newburyport, people who live here, people who want to ride along the boardwalk and go visit, another part of town, drop off a bike. It makes really good sense for a lot of the infrastructure and assets that we already have in place. It's almost paid for. It's over in 3 years if we don't like the metrics, which were requested by the chair and provided that, they're going to be measuring themselves on alongside the administration and us, as we will evaluate every single one of those grant acceptances as they come in and decide whether or not we do or don't want to take the free money. A little while ago, we voted on a grant acceptance for elder energy sharing, $50,000, and it was accepted unanimously. And now I just, I want to say, I think these grant dollars are just as good as those grant dollars and the other ones that we approve. And I would hope that this would be a unanimous acceptance from this council, because I think it's something that the whole program is less than the free cash transfer that we just forced out of the budget.
Counselor Wright and then Counselor Khan. Oh, actually, Counselor Zede had his hand up first, so.
It's all right. I'm happy to yield to you if you like. Just a question to the chair. The location of these stations is yet to be determined, correct?
Correct.
And the process for doing that is kind of squishy. It's the DPS and the vendor and the public get to decide where these are, and the deciding body is going to be either the parks if it's a rail trail, or the parks if it's our new park, or if it's neither of those, then it's somewhere else in the city.
Point of information, there are 6 bike stations proposed, and they've discussed in committee, having worked with parks on these locations. Yep.
So, if you could answer that.
Yes. So actually, the Parks Commission didn't approve the actual sites. So from their notes from the June 20th meeting, they approved the bike share program in general, and they approved docking stations could be placed in the parks, provided the city council approved the program, and provided that the parks had the final say over where they went in the parks. So again, these are aspirational goals. To the at-large councilor's question, it says right in their updated presentation that the locations will be determined by through the RFP process, working with DPS and the vendor. Public's not invited, to be able to figure out where the most beneficial kind of points are to be able to run that.
Okay. Counselor Wright, you all set?
For now, yes, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Zede?
Thank you. So I too, I guess I'm a little bit lost, because when this first came in, it didn't have the order. It was a communication, I think, and then we said, well, I think it needs a little bit of things, so we ended up with the order. And then it went to community services. I can't remember if that was the order. I think the communication went to, and then we said, okay, yeah, we need more information. Then we came out, we went in with an order, and I think this is one of those classic chicken or the egg, is basically there's not a plan because we haven't accepted the grant, but if we don't accept the grant, we don't get a plan. So to me, I just want to, before I have a few questions because I'm trying to understand, is the reason I'm approaching this differently than, say, for example, the Green Communities grant is when I read the finances, which is mostly what I care about, frankly, is that there seems to be a deficit baked into the thing. I mean, it could work out really well. It's certainly possible if the revenues work out and if additional grants come forward. However, if they don't work out, we could be on the hook for some funds, and that's kind of tough to understand why the council, after all the conversation tonight about not sort of chasing butterflies, why would we just shift our priorities and say, okay, yeah, we're willing to spend XYZ dollars on this when we have all those other things that we would like to do. So that's why I'm approaching it differently. And I mean, I think the deficit is right in the spreadsheet. I mean, they're saying, there's some assumptions about rides, and the rides are supposed to generate money. And then, so that's how I'm approaching it. So let me just ask my questions before I get too far into some thoughts. So if I understood correctly, Parks Commission is generally on board with this concept, and if we approve it, then they think the sites are okay, but then they want to go back and have another vote. There's one of these that's in my ward potentially, and one of them that's on the fringe of my ward. So I'm just trying to understand, if a resident asks me a question about where these things are going to go, what would I tell them? So the answer is, we approve it, then Parks will approve again after the RFP, but the RFP people decide where it's going to go?
So conceptually, we have 6 points where they want to go. And conceptually, there's approval from the Parks Commission and potentially from us to be able to approve this. But the details of where exactly would go may change based upon the vendor's expertise. They say, you don't want to be here, maybe you want to be here. DPS says we can't support that there, maybe they can go here. And Parks is really just holding out a bit of finality, saying things like, well, if you put anything in our park, we want to have final say as to where exactly you put it. I don't think that's unreasonable at all.
Okay, so my second question is, when you look at the spreadsheet that's on slide 9, which has the costs in red and then the sources of funds in red, under sources of funds, it says federal funds. That's the grant that we're being asked to accept. But everything below that line is assumptive, that there will be other grants and sponsorships, that user fairs will generate this amount of money based on some assumptions, that there will be user memberships at this amount, and then the remaining to raise is not even an assumption. They're just telling you we don't even know where that money. So when I read this, where does 50 to 100 come from? I mean, in the first year, you have 20 plus 13, that's 36. In the second year, if you add up those four numbers, 12, 22, 2, and 7, and so on and so forth, it seems to pile up faster than...
It does. So in year 1, they do have current commitments for grants, which is why that number is bigger, and they have put in placeholders for years 2 and 3 going forward.
Okay.
The user fees and memberships are tied directly to the metrics, which we can just say out loud, they're not going to help pay for the system. They're just extra. So there needs to be another source of revenue. I'm suggesting they might want to get behind an advertising model to be able to get banners, et cetera, to be able to drive revenue in.
Okay.
Here's the part that makes these numbers grow faster, is that the grant isn't a 100% grant. It pays for 80% of the capital costs only. So if we have an operational model, and we pay for all the CapEx up front, meaning we pour the pads, we buy the bikes, we do all of that, then conceptually, years 2 and 3 aren't covered by the grant because they're all operational expenses, not capital expenses. And that seems to be a detail that no one can actually put their finger on. I wish we could have, but we didn't.
All right, I just have just 2 more questions, so maybe 3. One is, what is the logic behind DPS being why was DPS selected as the home for this?
That was a
effort?
decision made by the mayor.
Okay. All right, last 2 questions. So you mentioned in your report something about a receipts reserve for appropriation.
Yeah.
But this order has nothing to do. I mean, I've written several reserve for appropriation.
But that's all the ask is of us.
But to create one, you need an order specifically creating an RRFA, and then there has to be purposes, and there's money goes in, and there's money goes out. We've seen those orders before. We've had the Plum Island one, we've had other. Okay, so that would need to be another thing. So my last question is, one of the biggest questions when this first came in was, Livable Streets has done a nice job of bringing this forward, but it was super unclear what their role would be going forward. I remember an initial one, they said, we're going to issue an RFP, and then we said, hold on, that may not make sense. So did that conversation evolve at all? Okay, so this is a city...
They will be supportive.
Okay.
The city will run it in conjunction with the vendor. They have great hopes that this vendor will do all of the work that needs to happen, 7 by 24, operationally, logistically. They will submit bills to us, and we will pay them.
Got it. All right, I'm just going to finish by I can't get there yet. Maybe somebody can convince me, but if somebody could tell me what they will give up to do this from another project or another priority, then I'm happy to listen. So in other words...
Who will give up?
Councilors can tell me what other priorities they may be willing to soften on, other things they may want to see happen in favor of this, because this feels a lot like parklets in some ways. You know, we set a fee, we've already realized it doesn't cover the thing, we involve DPS, now they're doing 3 to 4 weeks a year of standing up parklets and breaking them down. We have this hidden behind a curtain vendor that theoretically, I guess, could solve all of our problems, but that rarely ever works out. And so I really can't financially get around my head. Why would I take this risk and get into the bike sharing business as a city at risk? If that's the priority and that's the goal, and we say, listen, the subsidy is worth it because this is what we want, fine. But that's where I'm saying, what else is going to give in order to make room for this? Because I mean, we got roofs and other stuff to do, and whether you say these are the same funds or different funds, it all seems to come from the same place in the end, and so that's what I need to be convinced on, because I don't have any problem with the idea.
Councillor Khan?
Great, thank you. No, I think those are excellent questions. For me, a couple of things that resonate, you know, and I think to kind of roll back a little bit, when there was, I guess, maybe 3 meetings total, and I remember attending the early ones and trying to see how other communities have rolled this in. I think the struggle here is, it did first come in through, we have this grant, this is an opportunity, this would be, Livable Streets has been discussing it. It was one of the items that they kind of flagged in terms of making the city a place where more people can find transit more easily, and biking is one of the best ways. It kind of evolved. We saw it become this concept, idea, a desire, the grants there. And then we've gotten more and more information. And I think one of the things that's going to be a little bit, something that we all need to look a little bit about is that it is a pilot. And that's one thing that I'm grateful to see, that it's a 3-year pilot. There's definitely some kind of I don't know if you see it as seed money or some kind of money that's available to kind of start it. Definitely also something to get some lessons learned. The operating costs, which if you look at, and I'm looking at that same table with the red the shading, if you just simply look at operating costs from year 1, 2, and 3, roughly almost 15,000, 21,000, 21,000. That was something that was pointed out from the beginning, that this is going to be a space where the operating costs would need to be factored in to whatever is done. The other aspects, were about raising money and other sources through these fees, but the operating cost is a real one. And so part of the conversation, and I think some of the debate and discussions in committee, and I'm going to one, I think mainly when it was in community services, was around, is this a value add? And to me, I do think some of the answers that we won't get them, because it is the chicken and the egg. We want answers, but we need to start something. We need to see the vendors get those RFPs to really understand who we're selecting, because each vendor does have models, advertising. And if you look at the other communities where many of them are running, they do have these kind of turnkey approaches that have been very successful. So part of me would love to see the first step, which is this approval. They tried many different ways on how they could get this first step going. And I know we have a lot of questions, and we're not going to get those answers until we really start launching this. So I think really the idea is, do we think it's a value add? Do we think it's worth doing this in a pilot structure? They did say, depending on how the concrete pads, that was one of the things. Well, if it's pilot and we want to now have an exit strategy because it's not working, how is that going to work? And that was one of the things that at the committee meeting was like, well, once they put the pads there, you could still use them as bike storage or locking your bikes. So there was some ways that, and I think those are the things to talk through when we have the RFP, when we have the process. How are they? Is it poured concrete? Are there other methods? But I really think this is the first step to start that pilot. And I, for one, in all the conversations that have been had, in seeing the other communities, which I think are really important, and for those of you who have used bike share in other communities, it really is a value add. And so I will be supporting this from a pilot perspective, and I think these are great questions, and I look forward to us continuing to be involved with Livable Streets and the administration. And Wayne Amaral was completely in support too, unless I hope I'm not misspeaking, but he was, when we talked about the kind of running of it and trying to get that, how does he feel like his department can handle it? He seemed favorable, is probably what I should say.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilor Lane. Just as a point of information, so this did come in as a communication to Community Services, big presentation about that. Several people raised the fact that, well, this new service, needs to be codified in some way rather than just doing a grant acceptance. So I wrote the order, and notice I'm not opining upon it right now, but the other thing I recall from the presentation, this is not going to cost the city there will be time from the DPS and grant management, vendor management perspective. The Parks Commission may have to do some approvals, but this is not, as a pilot, supposed to be using any city money, and it's up to the vendor to figure out how to raise all that. So we'll go to Councilor Lane now. Councilor Lane, you still there?
Thank you.
Okay, go for it.
Yep, I'm here. I was looking at projected revenue figures here. I do think this is a great program, personally. I do see the value add. I do see, as the Councilor McCauley and Councilor Z both pointed out, the impact, we just set the tax rate, and experienced how much everything has gone up, and I think a valid point was, where do we draw the line? What do we, where's the prioritization of what we want to do or not do as a result of taking on little projects? I mean, just to point out, started a little project with Plumber Spring, that was, a big hit. There's things that come along that are kind of, medium ticket items along the way that we can't account for or we're not accounting for. And that makes me real nervous financially. But again, this, I was trying to wrap my head around the revenue, the expected revenue, and what that's going to bring in. It just kind of confused me. But I will say, in the spirit of just moving this forward, I feel like I am in support of this. I'm in support of the program. When it comes down to ponying up money for this, that's going to be a different story with my vote. So that's where my head is at now. Just wanted to share my thoughts.
Thank you. Any other councilors who have not yet spoken? Councilor Donahue?
Thank you. Just real quick, the one councilor's question. I would give up the parklets. I would give up the whole parklet program, just gone, and take this instead. So, and I have no dog in this fight. I could never get on one of those bikes, so that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Okay. Further discussion? Councilor McCauley?
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate it. I think the discussion touched upon some of the angst that's going on here is, right, we generally are supportive of it. We do see some value of it. We're trying to be an incubator for a pilot program, but in many ways, this cake is only half baked, and that's part of the problem. And we have, do we need to approve it in order for an RFP to happen? We do need to have another order to set up a receipts reserve so we can accept the grant and put it in a certain place and pay bills for it and things like that. I get it. I don't know if there's what we think this order will actually do other than just authorize the use of a bike share. These are kind of the questions that we never, operationally and procedurally, we never got to amongst the council. Forget about the bike share. I think we know what the bike share is. It's a pilot. They don't know until they get a vendor what's going on here. All of our answers might be answered when they get a vendor, but how do they go about getting a vendor? And I think that's what this is about. So I'm asking as much as, I delivered a committee report. I gave an opinion based upon what I saw in my experience in my life. And what I'm seeing here is that this pilot may be a little early, or it might be right on time, and I think that's what we have to decide.
Thank you. Councilor Zede?
Thank you. So I just want to, again, put in perspective the numbers. The 3-year total for this program is $298,000. 180 of that is covered by the grant, and 118 is we don't know. It's the combination, it's the final column there if you add up the 4 rows, the other grants and sponsorships that I assume we can't. So I think our decision today is really to address risk. I mean, you basically have to say, the worst case scenario is we're going to be on the hook for $118,000. Again, these are estimates, could be worse, could be better. And that's 118 to leverage 180. That's the question. This is how all grants are. They give you something and they expect you to put something in. Now, if we're lucky and the grants work out and the user fares work out and the user memberships work out, which by the way climb of course in every year, and that the remaining to raise, which is I think an admission that we don't know that. So I'm going to sort of challenge the notion that no public money is going to go into this by motioning to amend that if this passes, no other public funds will go towards this program. We did this with the pickleball idea, and I think didn't happen because I think we see this often is there's always this hope. I mean, it's a positive thing. It's a hope that the money will come through. So that my amendment would mean no free cash, no general fund dollars, no CPA dollars, and that's a motion to amend. We can massage the language, but that no other public funds are intended to go towards this purpose.
Second.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment. So essentially, and you said you could smooth out the language, no public funds, free cash, general fund, et cetera.
CPA as well. Yeah, public funds, all public fund sources.
All public funds. Simple as that? You want to add?
Simple as that.
Local public
city
funds.
funds.
Yeah, local is fine. Yeah, city or local,
Okay,
whatever.
so motion on the floor made and seconded. Comment on, or discussion on the amendment. Councilor Khan?
Yeah, may I just get some clarification? I guess because it's a 3-year pilot, would we say not, I guess I'm really trying to see how we can make this work, because part of me knows there's, I'm trying to look at the operating costs here. I mean, I guess, are we going to say for the 3-year pilot? Is that what?
I mean, this wasn't intended to have a time limit, and I don't know if we need to make a motion. Motion to,
Can we move to continue the meeting beyond 10:30?
there you go.
Second.
So, yes,
Oh.
absolutely.
Waive the rules.
Yep.
Waiving the rules. Councilor Harmon?
So waiving the rules, yes.
Going past 10:30.
Just stay for more fun. Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Preston?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Granis?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so amendment, Councilor Khan.
Yeah, just to finish what I started off as rambling a little bit. And this is where, gosh, I wish we had people to answer some questions. Because I thought, when Director Amaral was talking about DPS's role, part of it was using, and maybe, I thought there was some overlap of some already services. I know complaints would be through the vendor. So I guess I'm just unclear. I want to be careful that if there was, let's say overlap, and that's why I want to make sure maybe if it's like no new source of funding, I don't know. So I guess I'm kind of struggling on how to do this without messing up what may have already been kind of talked about for use. And then my other question is, why no CPC funds if it's eligible under, and I don't even know what now. I'm trying to remember the categories. I know there's open space and there's affordable housing, but
Recreation.
Recreation is what it would be.
that's it. So why would we not use a recreation element?
Not if it's
Okay, so anyways,
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're not locking ourselves.
Not that he's clamoring for it, but I could allow Rick Tainer, who's one of the prime drivers of this, to be a panelist to fill in any of this.
Sure.
And you just raised your hand. Rick, do you want to speak?
he's come back in.
So,
Yes.
yeah, if you're following the discussion, we're talking about the use or lack thereof of public funds for the 3-year pilot. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, thank you. There seems to be a lot of misunderstanding about the sort of concept budget we brought forward. And so I just want to be clear that everything that is in the grant column right now is not projections, it's actual grants received so far. And the bottom line of the funding gap the funds remaining to be raised are what we're still working on. And there's no intent at this point to be coming back to the council for any additional local funding for this. But I would be concerned, I think that was Councilor Khan's, what she raised about how we would interpret no local funding being used for this, whether that would mean that no local staff funds or anything like that. So I think we need to be a little bit more flexible there. I would obviously hope that you wouldn't tie this down so much that there's no possibility of, a few thousand here or there. I don't expect to use it, but we obviously would have to come to you. And I think that there was a statement made at one point that there's something like $118,000 that you would be committed to if you accepted this. And this is a 3-year pilot project, but the contract would only be for 1 year at a time. So if at the end of the first year, the city felt that it wasn't working out, we would just not renew the contract for the second year. So it's a 1-year contract with 1-year renewals for up to 3 years. So basically, what you're looking at right now is something like a gap of 22,000, which is the first year gap. I can answer any other questions if you like, but that's where I see the key things. I would hope that you wouldn't constrict this too much.
much because, as we're saying, we're trying to see whether this would work through a pilot program. There could be unforeseen results of those that would restrict any other local public funds. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to put you on, I'm going to remove you as a panelist. Don't take it personally, which I think you've already done.
Change role to attendee.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So, Councilor Khan?
Well, yeah, no, sorry, that was very helpful, because that table kind of confused, and I forgot, we hadn't talked about this in a while from when that presentation was done. So with that said, so it sounds like the remaining 22,000 year one, so this is very helpful. I think it actually, I hope alleviates a little bit more from what people are thinking here, is that we do have this opportunity, if it's annual contracts, to say, no, this is not working, it's not bringing in the money we thought, or paying for itself with the memberships. So with that said, I think I'm in support of it. I don't think we need that amendment because, again, I feel like after 1 year we could see, but if that makes people comfortable to support it, then I will, obviously whatever it is to compromise to see this go through, because I do think there's a lot of good value here and a lot of work already done to make it seamless.
Okay, discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, roll call on the amendment.
Make sure what the amendment is. So I've got a motion to amend the existing motion to approve to state that there will be no additional local funds expended.
Towards this? Towards this? Yeah, okay, don't need the words.
Okay. Roll call, Mr. President?
Yes, please.
Wait, can I,
Sir Harmon?
so a motion to amend the motion to approve, if this fails, then the whole thing, what?
No, we go back to
Then there's a
the
motion to
motion.
approve.
Fails, the thing is still on the floor.
Just the motion.
Thank you. It's late.
Right
Councilor
back to you.
Preston?
Just, if I could. So I do share the concern around, if we say no use of public funds, does that eliminate the in-kind work from city staff? Because that...
I don't think so, and both motioners are
Okay.
shaking their heads. So
Then I can-
it's funds. It isn't in-kind efforts or...
Okay.
Sorry, to add on,
Councilor
can we
Khan.
add that as a clarification? Can we put that in there? Not including in-kind. I would feel more comfortable if we explicitly state that.
I'm good.
Okay, so added, not including in-kind.
Not including staff time, is that what you prefer?
Yeah, something like that.
That works, yeah.
Not including staff time.
Correct.
Okay, roll call on the amendment.
Okay, Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
No.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
No.
Councilor Granis.
No.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion passes. So the motion on the floor is motion approved as amended.
Further discussion on the underlying motion, Councilor Zede?
All right, I will support it with the amendment. Thank you for the compromise. I just want to state on the record what my understanding is. So we've all, I think generally there's always, has been mentioned, support for the idea and the program. Now it's up to the proponents to make it happen without coming to the city for money in any form. If you need staff time, sure. And incidentals are typically not included in those things, like if you make copies or something and you use a pen, a ballpoint pen, those are not things. But, these kinds of programs are really nice, and it's really hard to tell the residents who work so hard and bring them forward. But once again, we're in a silo. We're talking about a bike program. We already forgot about all the other stuff that we were talking about tonight. And $22,000, $10,000, whatever the number ends up being, I think if this is with this amendment, that's my understanding. I'll support it with that understanding in mind.
Thank you. Further discussion on the underlying motion, Councilor Wright?
So, conceptually, yeah, a bike share program would be nice. I'm not going to support it. I don't know what happens to these pads. I don't know where they're going. If the pilot fails after a year, we've got pads with stuff on them. If they go in the park, the real park, I'm going to be appalled by it because we've just spent $6 million on the park. So And the other thing we don't control is the RFP process. Councillor, Mr. Tainter has said it's going to be a one-year only process. Do we know that? There's no guarantee it'll be for 1 year only. We don't know what that contract's going to look like. And previously this evening, we agreed to take $150,000 out of the budget to support affordable housing. We don't know where that's coming from either. So there's too many unknowns for me at this time to vote in favor of this. So my vote's going to be no.
Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Roll call on the motion as amended. Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Preston.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
No.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
10-1, motion passes.
That's all we have tonight. Oh, that's all the excitement we have. That's all the excitement we have tonight. We will have our regular meeting, not this Monday, but a week from this Monday. It'll be the 10th. Going forward, we're prepping for the 16th. We hope to clean up as much as we can going forward. Thank you.
All right, go to the order. Councilor Zede.
I'm just looking ahead to Monday for budget and finance. Because community service is canceled, can we do 5 p.m. instead of 6:30? 5 to 6:30, we'll have a hard stop for Public Works and Safety.
No, you don't have to.
Oh, you don't have a meeting?
Not this Monday.
Okay, so what do you, oh, I just want to make sure everybody knows this committee of the whole. Do you have a preference, Counselor, 6 or 5?
I like 5 to 6. That's just fine.
5 to 6:30, Monday. There.
Councilor Lane.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for your patience with me being remote and trying to get a little better here. It seems to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, so hopefully I'll be seeing you all in person soon, but thank you for your patience.
We'll look forward to that and keep taking 2 forward and only 1 back.
Get well soon.
All right, we're gonna, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A1, to discuss an open meeting law complaint brought against the City Council by Walt Thompson, and that would include executive minutes. So moved by Councilor Preston. Thank you. And we will not be coming out of, we will not be reconvening in open session. Is that part of the motion as well? Always get confused. So Councilor Preston made, seconded by Councilor McCauley. Thank you so much. Roll call. Councilor.
Actually, Council President, I won't be joining you for
Okay.
executive session by remote.
All right.
Just to let you know and everybody else know.
You could take part in the roll call and then you can vacate. And I think Councilor Donahue